Hello, my friend. I'm glad you made it. I am CHARLEE SIMONS, and this is Do Not Talk. Talk about two things you're never supposed to talk about: religion and politics. Too divisive, son. Don't talk about those things. Well, Pop, I love you, but I think that was some bad advice that everybody was given to us when we were growing up. We should have never stopped talking about those things because one decides what life is going to be like here on Earth. The other one decides what it's going to be like when we leave it. Makes it kind of important, and we need to talk about more important things than Super Bowl and halftime shows and Taylor Swift and whatever, drones over New Jersey, whatever. Let's let's get down to some meaty stuff, which is what this show is going to be like and all about today. Simone Anderson is my guest, and podcaster Mike Cook. They both have their own shows, and I love talking to both of them separately. This is going to be the first time I brought them together. So you're in for a real treat. Three podcasters, and only two of them with great knowledge and advice, and me. So I'm really looking forward to this. And if you would please follow this channel, this page, wherever you're watching, if you'll follow it or subscribe if you're on YouTube. Also, you can follow my Facebook page, CHARLEE Simons, CHARLEE SIMONS, and on Rumble. Rumble's the biggie. That is the conservatives' answer to YouTube. I can't speak for my guests, but I'm quite sure they've had shows pulled off YouTube. I don't think Mike is even on there anymore. He just said, screw it. I don't even want to mess with it. Rumble.com/DoNotTalk. If you could follow that while you're there. And by the way, Mike and Simone, I'm up to almost 2,000 followers on there now. After struggling and struggling, all of a sudden it's just been clicking. It's been wonderful. So rumble.com/DoNotTalk. Follow that channel, please. Like the shows, comment. All of this helps with the whole breaking down the algorithm thing, which seems dead set against us, we conservatives. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds without bringing them in first. And let's do that now. Ladies and gentlemen, for your dining and dancing pleasure, the beautiful Simone Anderson. Hello, my friend.
Well, hello, CHARLEE. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
Well, it's my pleasure having both of you on. Simone, I want you to meet Mike Cook.
How you doing?
Hello, Mike. Nice to meet you.
And he said dining and dancing. I said, I hope he's not talking about me.
I really value talking to the both of you. So when I had Simone scheduled, and I was talking to Mike yesterday during the presidential inauguration, I tried to put him on, but we were having sound problems and so on. I'm like, shoot, because Mike always has great input and insight. And so I just said, well, why not get you both together on the same show? I think this is going to be fantastic. And the things that I wanted to talk about, of course, were what affects us out here in California, even though I doubt if you all are even seeing it on the mainstream media anymore, because once Democrats started looking really bad with how much they actually caused the most horrific fire, devastating financially, property-wise, in the history of the state of California, once it started coming out how bad Governor Hairdo is, how that goofball Bass, Karen Bass, LA mayor, the fire chief, all of them handled everything, and how it could have been prevented and should have never gotten to that point, the media stopped covering it. Have you noticed that? You're not hearing about the big fires. Are they not going on anymore? No, it's still happening.
I saw that somebody posted on my show this morning that lives in San Diego that they got a big fire breaking out down there right now too.
So much of it is arson. We got these nut bags going around. I don't know if it's somebody's paying them or what, or they're just, they're just crazy going around starting these fires. I do believe the one in Palisades, which really started the whole thing. I think that, will we ever know that arsonists were caught? No, oftentimes the investigatory arm of CAL FIRE, which they have their own armed investigators, they find these arsonists, they prosecute, but the media never gets wind of it. They never report it. Why is that?
Or they release
Why would you not be
arsonists.
trumpeting? Look at all these arsonists that we're incarcerating. Wouldn't that be a deterrent, don't you think?
No, because when we were having the fires here in Shasta County, they were arresting the people and letting them out the same day under the no bail.
Which was a Gavin Newsom thing, of course.
Exactly. So they're letting them out. Even they're saying that the people aren't being held in Southern California. So I haven't confirmed that myself, but neighbors are complaining that the people have been released.
Well, there's that guy that they arrested on camera. The neighbors caught him trying to start a fire with a torch in his hand, and they arrested him. Then they released him because they said there was no probable cause.
Yeah, that was amazing.
I'm like, the guy had a torch in his hand starting a fire on camera. I mean, I don't know.
And the only reason why that got any traction press-wise, I think, is because neighbors held him down.
TikTok
held him down and then it was on TikTok. Yeah,
they posted it on TikTok and it took off. No wonder they want to ban that thing.
Exactly.
Well, TikTok allows the bad stuff about America to go through, not the bad stuff about
Never
China.
about China, do
But
they?
if you want to see the atrocities committed by the Israeli military, go on TikTok. And they have footage of them talking about terrible things and doing terrible things. That's why they've cut off YouTube, I believe, because I'm opposed to all war. But the reality is there's a lot of atrocities being committed and things are totally out of control. And
do you see the atrocities that Hamas committed against the Israeli people?
Yes, and I
their
agree.
Own people?
But
okay.
Doing it to each other, and there's 10 or 20,000 people more now. And we are just shipping 2,000-pound bombs to them today because Trump doesn't think the ceasefire is going to hold. So we have now dropped more bombs on that area than they did on Dresden during the World War II.
Yeah, but Dresden was all one day.
They've been, I guess, the amount of tonnage, if you listen to the military people, there's military people on both sides of the aisle.
Over a year and a half. Dresden was one day.
Yeah.
So and 175,000 people died in Dresden.
Well, as Trump said, there's going to be a lot more deaths than we've been told on all sides of these different wars. I personally am opposed to war because the same people are financing the same sides. Who gave Hamas all the money? The United States and Israel for the last 25 years. So, there's way more to these stories, and I have empathy for people on both sides. There's innocent people being killed all over the world. Our financial system has collapsed. As you saw, I sent you earlier today, and I've told you in the past that the United States, the corporation that controlled our country, went bankrupt the day we locked down for COVID. And we are seeing the outcome of all of this all over the world. I think it has something to do with Greenland coming in and the threats about Canada. If you look at the invitation to the inauguration, it no longer says Washington, D.C. You can bring that up. Washington, D.C. is a foreign hostile corporation. The reason the Jan 6ers were being held is because the United States is not, because the Washington, D.C. is not part of the United States. And they were prisoners of war in a foreign hostile nation. And that's why when Trump came into power, yes, look at it, no longer says Washington, D.C. It hasn't said that for a while. And you can see right here on this.
City of Washington, if you look right in the middle there.
Yes, and what did Trump say during his inauguration speech? We are now a sovereign people. And unfortunately, the fires in LA, what a lot of people, as you know, I like to cover the financial system. I follow the money. Right now, the entire world economies are collapsing. 6 of the top 10 nations leaders have resigned or been thrown out over the last few months. The banking systems are collapsing everywhere. The financial systems are collapsing anywhere. There are no factory orders. International trade has dropped off dramatically. We are in a massively transitional time. And one of those reasons is because the corporation owned by the City of London, and if you look really deep, it's really owned by the Vatican, that structure has been and is collapsing. And they are replacing it with a new system. This has happened many times in history. But a lot of people don't understand that the 1906 fires in California set up a massive nationwide depression. And what happened then was they implemented the new financial system because the financial system had collapsed at that time.
Fires in 1906. Are you talking about the San Francisco earthquake?
Yes, those fires put us into a massive
fires, right? That was just in the city and surrounding areas of San Francisco, though, right?
But it was a financial capital.
No.
It was a financial capital for the United States. California is still one of the largest nations on its own as a country. We've lost 250 billion. Insurance companies will be pulling out. They are pulling out. Everyone got their notices yesterday in the mail. A lot of people, my neighbor's car insurance went from 250 a month to 658 in one day on Allstate, and he has nothing. Allstate, the day after the fire started, put in new requests to raise their rates, starting at around 36% and going up, or they were going to pull out of the state. So
You know what
the
just popped in my mind?
On the insurance,
Yeah.
the major insurance companies have been pulling out of California for 3 years.
yes,
And the reason is because California policy doesn't allow them to raise their rates, but a small percentage, which wasn't enough to cover the lack of infrastructure repair that California was doing. You couldn't, me and you both grew up in California, Charlie. You used to be able, when I lived out there in the 80s, you used to be able to pull the greenery, or in your case, the brownery, away from the houses. In fact, it was encouraged. I remember commercials on TV say, cut back the brush 20 feet from your house.
They call it defensible space. Yeah.
And now you're not allowed to do that in California anymore. So, and I don't know how it works in California. Here in Missouri, when I want to insure my house, the insurance agent comes along, or the insurance inspector comes along and says, you need to fix this, this, and this, and this, because, or we won't cover you because we want you to. Well, in California, they can't do that. So these companies have been pulling out now for 3 years, all of them, not just State Farm, all of them. California in another year isn't going to have any homeowners insurance or auto insurance.
It's all going to be state controlled, and
Probably that's probably the plan.
Yeah, that's part of the plan. And I think you know what's ringing in my head right now are the words of Klaus Schwab: "You will own nothing and be happy." Well, if they price you out of even being able to own a vehicle, to where you can't even afford to have that, you're going to have no other form of transportation except either bicycle or mass transit, like our high-speed rail that'll take you from Hanford to Fresno in 7 minutes.
Well, as soon as there's a warm day, I'm going to go out to my wood fire smoker right next to my old Jeep. And I'm going to know that I live in God's country, where I can take my gas-powered lawnmower and mow my grass.
Yeah. Good.
Well,
That's
a lot
good
of
for
what
you.
Gavin Newsom was doing is he was forcing the insurance companies to go into areas that were uninsurable, right? He was making them insure every area. So, of course, they're going to end up leaving because they're huge fire areas. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have enough people to pay into the system there. Insurance works as a risk. I work in insurance in a day job. A lot of people don't. You put a pool of similar risk people in the same pools. But what they were doing is totally in the face of all insurance laws over the last 200, 300
absolutely.
years.
Is that just incompetency, or is that by design because he wanted to have that happen? I mean, how many homeowners in the Palisades and Malibu area down in SoCal had their insurance canceled 2-3 weeks before the big fires first broke out? How many?
And these things are to
Thousands.
be discovered
Thousands.
over time, right?
So is it an accident, or is it all by design? What do you guys think?
No,
What
I
do y'all
believe
think?
it was all by design. It's the same thing with the assassination attempts. Is our government this incompetent? Is
Yes.
every element of our government incompetent,
Yes.
or are they using our resources to collapse our economy and take us over?
I
You know,
think the
people don't
question. I think the question is yes to both. Yes, our
Yeah.
government is that incompetent.
And coming from a military viewpoint there, Mike knows that you're not going to find more waste than in the military-industrial complex. They've perfected it, wasting our money and our tax dollars. And look what we did in Afghanistan. There's a reason why over $80 billion of equipment was left behind when Biden pulled out as drastically as he
At least
did.
the military waste is constitutionally mandated, where the rest of it isn't. So,
well, if you
The-
look at where Afghanistan is, it was right under the Ukraine. And if you watch the auctions, you could go watch the Afghanis auctioning off the American supplies to all of our foreign hostile neighbors. You could go
including
watch
China,
it if you wanted to.
including China. China is basically controlling Afghanistan now.
Well, they've got all the lithium mines. Who's benefited from our occupation of Afghanistan? China. They're
Right.
the ones doing all the mining there now. None of our companies are mining down there. I know, having a mining background, Afghanistan is one of the geologically richest areas in the world. The U.S. Navy and their geological survey and the Army, they did all of that work years ago and showed. I think that's really what the dispute about Afghanistan is about, is eventually conquering all those resources in a third world country where the people can't fight back. And that's what's been
Well,
going on.
I agree with you on that, except that what you just said, China controls it. Who controls the resources in Iraq? China. Who controls the resources in Syria? China. It's almost like the guy that's been president the last 4 years owed them something. I don't know. Maybe.
How about that? Why is China collapsing though? And they are financially, they are collapsing.
China. Why is China collapsing? Because
Yeah.
the same thing as the United States of America. They spent way too much money. Their money's not existent. It's fiat. It doesn't really exist, and their socialist economic policies don't work. Just like here in the United States, and they print money as much as we do, if not more. And they'll go around and they'll say, and you were alluding to TikTok lying about what's going on in China. They go around and they say everybody's employed, and they're all employed. They're not doing anything, but they're employed.
And they're also not getting paid.
Yeah, well, and they're they're getting paid because they get to live and they get food stipend or something, but that's about it. But they built all these cities to nowhere. They got all these cities. That was in the 2000s, and before the financial crash, they were building cities and cities and cities. I got a part of my extended family on my dad's side owns these huge quarries in Oklahoma and Arkansas. And he said that he was filling up train cars full of decorative rock and shipping it to California, where they were putting it on planes and flying it to China. Do you know how much it costs to fly rock? Think about that. Because China was building all this stuff and money didn't matter. He said, my family member is a multimillionaire and he made his fortune selling rock to China and for their infrastructure. So they were doing this to make their money look real. But all that's coming back on them now. And their economy. And let me tell you something, the Chinese economy, when it goes, the bond market, the stock market is worldwide. The bond market is worldwide. When there's a crisis in the Chinese bonds, there's a crisis in the American bonds. I was just looking, the 10-year bonds at 4.5. That's going to make banks go underwater. But when that happens, it's going to spread. It's going to cause, they call it systemic cancer across the world when that happens. And it's happening, like she said, it's happening. It's not fast right now. It's not dominoes falling, but they're trying to do everything they can to keep it afloat. But there is in big trouble. We are.
People are massively pulling out of China. Foxconn is being blocked from pulling out of China. They just held a Japanese businessman for 110 days because there's a mass exodus from China. What people don't understand, and what I have believed and said on this show before, that we have been and are at war with China for some time.
We're definitely in a financial war with China. It's not a shooting war yet, but it's definitely a financial war.
I believe that things like the direct energy weapons and the fact that our politicians, I think that Charlie and I have talked about this before. Right before Trump came into office, I saw these flash videos, and there was over 3,000 CCP tanks on the border of Mexico and Guatemala waiting to enter the United States.
And they're now in Ukraine. Troops are in Ukraine, Chinese troops.
Well, and basically we defaulted our governor.
Korean troops.
Yeah, our governor, Gavin Newsom, the governor of Oregon, the governor of Washington State, and the governor of Hawaii were taking illegal loans because their states were bankrupt, and they weren't meeting they were taking illegal loans from the Chinese, whereas they pledged our state and federal lands for those loans. They owe over 100 million acres here in California, and all those areas are mostly where it's burning. Even Pacific Palisades is over Will Rogers State Park. So I believe that they are claiming the land because we defaulted on those loans to the Chinese. If you watch when Xi Jinping comes to California, there's no American flag. They fly the Chinese flag only. I worked for years in diplomatic community. This means there's no joint partnership. So I believe that for a long time, the Chinese have infiltrated our state. They've infiltrated our government. Gavin Newsom has a whole plan of a country called Cascadia, where these countries would break off and basically join China in the Pacific Rim. So these things have been going on for a long time. This is why Gavin Newsom is so happy and the mayor is so happy. I don't know if you watch their body language. They
Yes.
are just so happy, and they're already
Yes,
talking
Mike is
about
doing it. Mike is actually doing it. Governor Hairdo being interviewed, talking with I think the governor of Hawaii, and yeah, he starts doing this little happy dance back and forth. It was the oddest thing.
He was talking about getting with venture capitalists to buy up the property, and he was all
He's-
giddy about it. And I thought, yeah, because you're getting paid. That's
I
all
put
about.
I posted about the changing the zoning from single family residences in Malibu and Palisades to multi-family. And I'm like, this is all about the 15-minute smart city. Trust me on this. And I had a bunch of people attacking me. The state has nothing to do with zoning. They're forgetting about the Coastal Commission.
Well,
Very
the state
powerful.
has nothing to do with zoning, but let me kind of. We're dealing with something. Central Missouri. Central Missouri is as red as you can get, and Central Missouri is so red it's almost black. I mean, this is the reddest part of the red that you can get. Okay. In Sedalia, Missouri, we got an out of control city council that's enacting a bunch of zoning laws that are they're going along, and if your gutters ain't painted, they're fining you a bunch of money when the little old lady on a fixed income or the retired veteran missing one leg, this actually happened. They take their homes and they demolish them. Now this is done. Why, how? And I'm thinking to myself, what is this about? And I asked on my show are you guys experiencing this in your little town, USA, across the country? And I had several people message me and say something similar. But what we have found out in Sedalia, Missouri is that they fired their attorney, which was a local attorney, and they hired this law firm out of Kansas City. The law firm out of Kansas City represents 900 communities, and that's all they do. And they come in and they institute these things, and it's a money-making thing for them because every time there's litigation where the city gets sued by the person that had their house, they get paid. So it's a money-making thing for them, but they introduce these policies everywhere. 900 communities hire these people. There's a little town south of us. Sedalia's got about 20,000 people in it. The county's got about 50,000. Just south of us, in the next county south, there's a little town called Colcamp, which is like maybe 2,500 people. They just hired the same law firm, and they're repeating the same process. It's all over the country that they're doing it. So what I'm saying is these communities get involved with these attorneys. These attorneys are, I don't know, maybe George Soros or something. I don't know. And so you're saying, well, it's not the state doing that. They're all working together. It's a strategery they're following.
Well, but the state, Pacific Palisades, is on top of Will Rogers State Park.
Right. But the state
So
park
that is
ground
state land.
owned and
I'm
operated.
from that area, so I can see it in my head right now.
The
Will
state
Rogers
park is the state, but the city, the property owned by that individual in the city is controlled by the city and the rules that the city puts in place, which is probably in cahoots with the folks at the state parks and with some sort of law firm in between. And who knows where the money's coming from to do all this, but I can absolutely see it. I can absolutely see the conspiracy happening with this law firm out of Kansas City.
Do you remember when the Chinese tried to purchase the Port of Long Beach about 20 years ago?
Well, they didn't purchase it. They leased it for 99 years, and Donald Trump upended it. He changed it. He said, no, we're not doing that. And now he's going after the Panama Canal because they did the same thing. They leased both ports on both ends of the Panama Canal.
They've done it all over the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so I believe that the Port of Long Beach has been, breached. And there's a large military submarine base that exists under the Pacific Palisades. You can, if you're a boater or a person who's lived off the coast of California, you can see the entrance on the right day. There's water systems that go all the way to Las Vegas under there, including to China Beach, where they found a lot of children a couple years back. So I believe that this is a much bigger attack on the home front. They're clearing out the Pacific Palisades that would be enemies' access. I think this is a much larger thing and a much longer term plan to remove people from that land, but also of what's going on deep underneath most of California are the large military underbases and the things
You
that are
know
going
about
on.
those, Mike? I know a lot of them were
I
put
know.
in during the Second World War.
I
There were a
don't
lot
know
of-
anything about those, to tell you the truth. I don't know
Okay, well,
anything about any of that.
I'm a native Californian and we've seen those openings and you can see the submarine traffic if it's the right time of year. So there's been, there's no secret. There's military bases. California is pettered with, because of the mining industry and because we've been a coastal city, there's underground tunnel systems. For instance, just in Woodland, a little town near me, if you go under the main bar there's a whole tunnel system under the little town. And basically, it was from the heroin dens that they used to run. The Chinese used to run the heroin dens under the mining towns. And so my friend owns a bar there. We can go down and see the old opium den, and there's still the tunnels under there. Sometimes they were made in the town. Other times they're remnants of the mining system that's were there before. So there are tunnel systems that exist all over California. Even a couple years ago, they found several children in cages during Halloween week here in Redding in one of those tunnel systems. So this thing is existing. It is going on. Human trafficking and the slave trade is part of, it's modern day communism. People don't make this link, but I have lived in several communist countries before and after communism. I was in Venezuela when it was collapsed. I was living in Russia. The communist mantra is modern day communism. It's put forward by the same people who used to own and control the Roman slave system. Rome never fell. The Roman families still control the Western world. And that's what we see through the banking system that started in Venice and the Vatican banking system, where they literally own our birth certificates and trade us like animals. So I personally believe that this system may have collapsed the day the world locked down for COVID. That's why the whole world stopped, because we lived under Admiralty law, which was controlled by the City of London. And you yourself can go look up the Bank of England. The day the world slowed down for COVID, the Bank of England went bankrupt and was unable to meet its reserves. And this is what happened in the 1929 Depression. It took 3 years for everything to collapse because it took that long for people to go through their life savings and understand what's really going on. I believe we are in a similar situation right now. Donald Trump himself said we are on the brink of the greatest depression in history right before New Year's. So anyone who's watching the world markets, I spent 2 months over Christmas trying to do a positive year-end show, and I looked at 10 economies. There's not one good news in any major economy in the world. Hopefully we are heading in the right direction, but as a whole world, we're going to be going through a very, very difficult time. And these issues were brought into place by the same people. The Bank of England is the same bankers from the Roman families. And the City of London is actually a Roman state and not part of. I worked in the City of London. Everybody who works in the City of London understands that it's not part of England.
Aren't there 2 cities of London?
Well, there's the City of London, and you literally, when you go into the City of London, you walk under a bridge and it's got the Knight Templar flag right over it. It's telling you who controls it, the Vatican. So it has its own laws. It has all of our major corporations are incorporated there, and they actually own the SEC through that system. So that's why we're
on any of this, Mike? What are your thoughts? I know you've got some input.
Well, when was the greatest percentage collapse of the American economy? The greatest.
You mean
percentage?
recently, or
For me personally, it was
in the
2008.
The Civil War.
Nope. The greatest percentage collapse was in the just before, it was in the mid to late 19 teens. And Calvin Coolidge was president. They called him Do Nothing Calvin or Do Nothing Coolidge, because it was the greatest collapse. It was twice the collapse of the Great Depression by percentage. And it was also the shortest, because what he did was nothing. He didn't get in and manipulate anything. He didn't get in and raise taxes. He didn't get in and punish the rich. He did nothing. They criticized him for being do nothing. I was just looking that up to make sure I had what I was right. That's what I was looking at. And he did nothing. The economy went bam and collapsed and went right back up. And we had the roaring 20s. That's what the roaring 20s was. And then we had a bunch of socialists. They didn't call themselves that yet, but that's what they were. And we had the Great Depression because another collapse happened because our economy, every 10 years since before the Revolutionary War, the economy would collapse and then it would reset and then it would collapse and it would reset. That's a part of the process.
Well, and supposedly that's why we took the Federal Reserve System, because we would never have a depression or financial collapse.
That's what they
again.
told us. That
was in the 1913, right?
But the reason they created the Federal Reserve System, the bankers, the ones that you were talking about a minute ago, is because they can win on both sides of it if they control the money printing, which is what happened. Is they win if it goes down and they win if it goes up. The Great Depression was them just cashing in and buying everything as everybody panicked. And they prolonged it through government policy. It didn't have to be that long. We didn't come out of the Great Depression until after World War II, when conservatives took over and started making maneuvers with policy to incentivize business and grow the economy again. They say that it was World War II. It was not. We were still in the Depression in World War II. So, and it just print money. Just print money. That's all you got to do.
Franklin Roosevelt actually prolonged.
Absolutely.
Prolonged.
Well, Franklin Roosevelt allowed them to take our birth certificates and put us into the final phase of the Roman birth certificate that our ancestors had left Europe to get out of.
As a corporation, right?
As a corporation.
And he suspended the ownership of precious metals, and he seized everybody's gold. And gold, yes. I think it was $26 an ounce.
They fixed the price.
Yeah, well, it was like $20 an ounce. And as soon as he got all the gold, he doubled the price of gold. They just manipulated the number and doubled the price of gold. So they paid you $26 for your ounce of gold, and then they turned the gold into $30 or $40 or whatever it was. It was double what I understand. I don't remember the numbers. I've got the numbers wrong in my head. But they doubled it. So your gold that you got $20 for, your $20 is now worth half what it was worth. That's what he did. He screwed everybody.
Well, and what a lot of people don't understand is after the Civil War, the reason that a lot of the Secret Service went around and collected everybody's gold and said it was silver and gold and that it was fake, and that they needed to give them this paper money and they could go to the bank anytime they wanted and get their gold. It was just
tender note. Yeah.
Of the gold.
We promise we'll give you this back in gold if you present this tender of paper.
And what happened when they went to the banks in the 1920s? There was no gold, and it was just the fake paper money. So then the government had nothing left to pledge because they'd stolen all of our gold already. They've reduced the price and cut down a lot of what we were producing when gold prices were higher, and they implemented the new system. So they took our birth certificates because the country had nothing left to pledge. So our birth certificates are literally kept in the Vatican Bank as collateral, and they use us. That's why it's so important for population growth in countries that are really struggling right now, are really having problems because they don't have the clout to service their debt. And eventually China will implode into the same system. I don't know if we've ever talked about China, but if you understand the opium wars, the exact same people that control China today through HSBC and those banks, at the end of the opium wars, they were forced to take the European banking system, and the European bankers are the ones that control Chinese investment to this day. There's contracts, you could go read about it. So really, we're fighting the same structure everywhere we're at. And that's my point, whether we're the bankers finance wars to get more, to pit us against each other. The purpose of banks is not to make money. The purpose of banks is to create debt, to enslave humanity. And you can, what did Rothschild himself say? You don't need to be the king when you own the king, or something like that. And basically, that's the system that we find ourselves
I think the
existing
quote
in.
you're looking for is that he was when you control the money, you
Yeah,
don't worry about the kings, you control the money. And you continue on what you're saying. In 1971, we went to a total fiat system,
exactly.
and our money is not anything but a promise, and it's a debt instrument, it's a note, it's a debt. Prior to that, you could change your dollar in for an ounce of silver. You get a silver
Well, and the international markets could settle that way.
Well, no, prior in 1964, you could take a 1964 silver note, go to your bank, and they would give you the only coinage dollar they had, which was a silver dollar. In 1965, they'd give you an Ike, which wasn't silver. So that's before it was peace dollars and Morgan dollars, and in 1965 it was Ikes.
Well,
I buy and sell silver coins all the time. I have silver notes. Silver note says that there is redeemable on demand at the Fed $1 silver dollar. Well, when they took us off that standard, that ceased to exist. Now your dollars are worth $1, and that dollar is a Susan B. Anthony or a one of them little fake gold dollars, whatever they call them. Which is worth about what the paper's printed. So it might even be worth less than the paper printed because the ink's expensive.
And I believe that move funded the rapid expansion based on nothing through China, right? 1971, does that sound familiar? Isn't that the year we normalized relations with China?
Well,
and we pumped all this money. And
one of the many great
our...
things that President Richard Nixon did, he says sarcastically, I just reject anybody who goes, well, President Nixon, he did some good things. He opened trade with China. Why? Why would you do that? Let them be their own. We want to stay in the corner and keep everybody away kind of country. Leave them alone. Let them just stay there and do that. And there's plenty of other places we can do trade with. Why was it so important to open trade with China, who was directly and militarily hostile towards us from the
How about David Rockefeller and Henry Kissinger? Let's look into their input in that. I think that, like many of our leaders, what's been exposed with Ghislaine Maxwell and those people, that they're blackmailed and extorted, and that frequently they're not the people who really have the power. There's a puppet person behind them. And I believe that they did those things because everyone was stunned when Nixon said that. And actually, that was my first big current event. I was a little girl and he went to China, and our class was supposed to write him a letter. And I grew up in a diplomatic family, and so my uncle worked at the Pentagon. And so I kind of grew up around these conversations even as a small child. So I decided to write to Nixon not to go to China. And I sent him a letter, and I got a letter back. And I got to read it in the town paper, and I guess they were quite entertained by my theories about China in 1971 when I was 6.
Yep. I want to first of all, I opened up the chat room and I see in there on Facebook, if you comment, I'll be able to read it. We'll be able to see it, and if you have a question, now's the time. But I want to say hello to Aaron Cates up there in Canada. He's watching right now, and he said, "Great info. Glad I joined." So I'm glad you're there too. Hello, Aaron, and you can as well.
Just so the Canadians understand that the Chinese and the United Nations have built large military underground bases all along the border of Canada and the US. And currently it was exposed that not only China military was being forced to go to China and train Chinese troops in frozen ground warfare, that they were actually trained several 100,000 Chinese troops there in Canada. Anyone who, excuse me?
Well, I was just going to say, I recently had Brad Wilder, who's a broadcaster up in Canada, on the show, and he was sharing things with me about what's happening right now that we're not even seeing in the media down here. Canada is in virtual collapse. Right
Canada is in collapse. It's very, very dangerous for us because the Chinese have already infiltrated that country. If you go to the northern part of Canada, where all the mines are, they have the Chinese military. They have Chinese military police stations all over the United States and in Canada. And right now, they're removing the Indigenous people, still own 2% of Canada. It's called the Trail of Tears. There's all kinds of, especially Indigenous women. And not only are they being murdered and mutilated, their bodies are being harvested and their unborn children are being taken. So this is a communist Chinese thing. And this is what's really going on in Canada. People in Canada they have the highest debt of any Western nation. and Canada is in serious trouble. Pierre Trudeau is a communist. It's open. His
Oh
father
yeah,
was an open.
and step down, or at least said he intends to step down. I don't know what that.
Inspector Cates there, he calls him calls Justin Trudeau the whore of Havana.
Yeah,
So that's his name for it.
That's so
He's got his
true,
own
right?
podcast. That's what he talks about. And I don't remember if he showed it to me or if I've stumbled on somewhere else. In 2020, there was Chinese military movement on video. I could probably find the video there in Western Canada, and that there was a treaty signed in 2020 or 2021 between Justin Trudeau and Canada that allows it authorizes China to use military force to protect Chinese assets in Canada.
I just told you about the mines, which are mainly the mines, and that's why the people are dead.
If Aaron's still in there, he'll comment and say that what I said is accurate. So yeah, that's true. That happened. That did happen. That was in around the Rona time. That was around the time I started doing podcasting. So.
Well, it's really, really difficult to talk to Canadian people about any of this kind of stuff because they just won't listen.
And it's not that I don't think that they all won't listen.
I was married to a Canadian. I live around a lot of Canadians. I've been trying to talk to them about these topics for 7 or 8 years. And finally, a few of them have come around. But Canada has a really good standard of living, and people are very simpatico there. And it's been really frustrating to watch, and it's really nice. One of my French Canadian girlfriends just recently came and said, okay, I finally hear what you're saying. But it took me 8 years of her rolling her eyes at me to finally get to the point of actually having a conversation. So
that did actually happen again with that show with Brad Wilder. And he said, well, at least we have a good healthcare system. And I said, Brad, you're not being honest right now. That's not true at all. You have doctors that have left in mass because they're being told they can't charge over a certain amount. So they've come down to the U.S. Where they can charge what they want. You have you have exorbitantly huge taxation going on in your nation. You're not getting free anything. You're paying for it. So stop saying that. Please stop saying that. And the worst part is, you can't even get an appointment. You can't get in for anything. You need a surgery and they deem it, well, it's not an emergency. So no, we deny this. You can't even get that treated.
Well, now they take care of you really, really fast up there in Canada. It's called MAID. That's how they take care of you.
That's
you
exactly
heard of MAID,
right.
Medical assistance in dying.
Yes.
Well, that's what Canada is top in. It's the top destination for medical suicide in the world. That's what they're leading in.
You can literally get them. I do too. I do too. And I love the Canadian people that I know. But they'll literally kill you just because you're poor.
Well, if you're feeling depressed and you're having a bad day, just go into the doctor and they'll take care of it for you.
Well, and they also legalized child euthanasia too.
Oh, yeah.
Just to top it off, now you can be a child and go.
How do we come back from this? How does President Trump, one man, might be building a strong administration? How does he stop this global collapse of our moral and financial standards that's purposefully being eroded, I believe, because they're all doing their father's work just as quickly as possible, for his time is short, and their father is the father of lies. They're doing the devil's work, bottom line, and they're getting incredibly wealthy from it. Because my first question always is, why? Why do they want to collapse this? Why do they want to do that? Why do they want to allow this to happen? Well, somebody's getting rich, somebody's getting paid, somebody is doing it because that is their ideology.
Well, we live in their slave system. They're
There's
not
a lot
going to
of
be able
money.
to control us when we no longer live in the slave birth certificate system where they literally trade us like animals in the stock market. And this is what they're losing. The people who I have different friends who, grew up and are descendants of slave families, and they always find it really interesting that these people own slaves. Like, for instance, Joe Biden's family co-founded the transatlantic slave trade in the 1300s in Ireland. Kamala Harris's family ran Brownsville and oversaw the election of Bustamante in Jamaica, who wanted to genocide the Jamaican people, the Rastafarians. So her great-grandfather assassinated Gandhi on behalf of the British U.S. intelligence. These people are generational intelligence operatives for the Vatican. And this is the system that we find ourselves in. I've spent the last 9 years studying it. I've followed every family line, and followed their real history. And even Kamala Harris's history is completely made up because she had to cover up who her family really was.
Which
And
was
even in
Jamaican.
her family tree, they have the Finnegan name, which is Joe Biden's mother's family name and the co-founding family of the transatlantic slave trade. So even somewhere when the transatlantic slave trade was made illegal by the British Parliament, they went down to India, right? And there's still Bidens living in that, where there were captains on the East India and West India shipping companies. It used to be called originally the Royal African Company, but it was made illegal because they realized it was highly illegal to take people across the ocean and kidnap them. So the British made it illegal. And that was in 1836, and both Kamala Harris's family and Joe Biden's family, according to the Irish Times and the British Times and the Post, in 2015 got their final settlement because they were getting reparations for their families because they lost their slaves and their future benefit of those slaves. So that's who's running our country. These people have been in place for a long time.
And the very same people who voted to put those people into power are the same ones who are cheering when statues and paintings and so on get destroyed because, well, that person knew somebody and lived next door to somebody who owned slaves and didn't report them. So we have to completely destroy every single bit of history of that particular American icon or hero. It's got to be dismantled and destroyed. But you'll turn right around and vote for these kind of people.
Well, see, most people don't know this, but what my point is these people aren't random people. They are put here to keep us in slavery. Communism is the new word for slavery, to convince you that it's better for someone to control every aspect of your life, where you live, where you work, right? So that's the crazy thing. My friends would say to me, all of these people, all of the like Malcolm X said, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, scratch a liberal, find a fascist. I'm just paraphrasing what Malcolm X said, but he was totally against this power structure. People have talked about this power structure for a long time. And basically, it's not only that Black people whose birth certificates are owned by the system, it's all of us.
Well, here's one. Oh, she froze up on us.
Who are owned by the system. They just seem to be the ones that are picked.
Here's one to add to that. Okay, so Hillary Clinton, she says that she's an early 20th century progressive. What does she mean by that?
Great question.
She's a eugenicist.
There's that too. And what she's talking about is the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, who invented, or didn't invent, but wrote the first book on eugenics, to which Adolf Hitler got his ideas from. And she said that that was her favorite person when receiving the Margaret Sanger Award. Now, but she said the wording is, these people use words, they change definitions of words. It's very important to understand what they're saying. When all these people are running around saying they're progressives. Hillary Clinton said, I'm an early 20th century progressive. Where does that word come from? I'll tell you. There was this organization in the 1930s. It's called the Bund Party. They put 35,000 people in 1939 in Madison Square Garden. You remember when Donald Trump was in Madison Square Garden and he said he's a Nazi because he's a medical or Madison Square Garden, and only Nazis go to Madison Square Garden, right? Apparently, according to MSNBC. Because in 1939, a bunch of Nazis showed up. They seized Heil. They had the bust of Hitler. They had the red flags with the little swastika sticker thing. They did all that. It's called the Bund Party, the National Socialist Party of America. That's what it's called. Then there was World War II and a bunch of Jews and gypsies and Christians and really bad reputation. And they couldn't get people to join their little party anymore. So in 1950, and this is according to the Discovery Channel documentary, in 1950, they changed their name to the National Progressive Party. So when Hillary Clinton says, I'm an early 20th century progressive, she says, I'm a Nazi, because that's who the progressives are. And our
you remember that Hillary
Clinton
was originally a Republican.
Well, Okay.
She was
I don't
on
know
the
about
Nixon
that.
There's
investigation
Republicans
committee.
running around calling. There's Republicans running around calling themselves progressive too. Just
Yeah.
listen to what they say. Look at what they do. Our
Yeah.
government is commo-fascist. Why do I say that? Because we have a fascist leadership that does public-private partnerships. Adolf Hitler and Ferdinand Porsche worked together in a public-private partnership to create the People's Wagon. By the way, that was the first crowdfunding that ever happened.
You're talking about the
Because what
Volkswagen.
the People's Wagon. That's what Volkswagen
Yeah.
translates to, the People Wagon.
Right.
Volkswagen.
Yeah.
They crowdfunded it. What they did is they said, look, if you pay us X amount of dollars out of your paycheck every single week, then we'll save up that money for you, and then once you paid for it, we'll produce your car. They crowdfunded it.
Interesting.
Only World War II came in and they switched the factory to making tanks, and no one got their cars or their money back. They got screwed. So the first meme coin, the first week, right? So we
First
have
Bitcoin.
we have not Bitcoin, but the meme coins, the ones that they pump and dump.
Yeah.
So we have a commo-fascist government. So we have a fascist government that works with corporations, lockstep in hand, which is fascism, and a communist bureaucracy, a Politburo of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats in all of the ABCs that make decisions. That is our economy right now, commo-fascism. They're running around going, Donald Trump's Hitler, when they're literally doing what fascists did. They literally do it from the book burnings to the working together with corporations. They don't take over. Fascist socialism doesn't take over corporations. They just put their people in charge of the corporations.
Well, if you notice, because they kept calling Donald Trump a fascist, it sounds like you and I went to the same high school and learned the definition of fascism, which was when corporations and the government work together to oppress the people. But under Trump, they've changed the definition. Oh, it's authoritarian people.
Well, they changed it. What they did is they took Nazi stands for National Socialists. They took off the socialist part and kept the nationalist part. Donald Trump's a nationalist. Nationalism bad. See, they're Nazis. They're bad. Adolf Hitler was a nationalist. He's bad. They forget the socialist part. See, Donald Trump is a capitalist nationalist, not a socialist nationalist. There's a difference. Nationalist just means you love your country. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, they always call him a right-winger. The Nazi Party was a socialist party. This is another way they've corrupted our language.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I was going to point out too.
Hitler was not a right-winger. This is just
this goes back to when I was in school, and I had teachers telling all of us that Nazis were far right. Communists are far left. Nazis were far right. And then I learned later, that's a load of crap, because what does Nazi stand for? It was an acronym, and you're right, National Socialist Party. They were socialists, which is frickin' communism. Let's just call it what it is.
Well, socialism.
That's what it was about. Total oppression, the government running everything. That's not a right-wing thing. Not at all. We want government out.
Socialism and communism are not far leftists. They are leftist. That is what they are. Socialism and communism. That's all it is. And socialism is just a means to communism. But if you go extreme right, you're not a Nazi. You're an anarchist. Extreme right is right wing is limited government. So if you go extreme limited government is no government. That's anarchist. And a step back from that is libertarian, where stay away from my pot. It's just,
and legalize my hooker.
So if you want, so the truth is, when you say left, but the problem is that fascism is another form of socialism. It's the same thing. It's just instead of nationalizing the company, they put their people in charge of the company. That's the only difference. So when you say leftist, you're saying communism, fascism, socialism. It's all of that. When you say extreme right, you're talking about extreme libertarianism and anarchist. That's what you're talking about.
Well, maybe we should put up our screen of how China is buying all of our farmland.
Yeah. Let's do that. I think that's a
And
great
kind
idea.
of, I think all this conversation has been from different angles, but we're all coming to the same
It's all
conclusion.
coming to one thing, and that's communism and the takeover of the world. And you're wondering, why would Islamic extremists be, favorable and working with communists and vice versa? Because they don't care if what is it? An enemy of my enemy is my friend. And they're working together, but they have different goals. One is going to be the total takeover of the world of Islam. The other one is total takeover of the world of government control. They don't care. They'll work together because it's all to bring down the one nation under God, standing indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, that has a Bill of Rights and has a U.S. Constitution unlike any other nation in the history of the world, where we actually have a say and input as to who's going to be calling the shots for us. We're standing in the way. Donald Trump screwed the whole thing up. And we're hopefully we'll have time for this discussion too, because something happened yesterday from a friend of mine who's very, very solid Christian follower of Christ Jesus, but has suddenly done a 180 on supporting Donald Trump because he's now convinced that that's all part of the whole globalist takedown agenda, and he's in the middle of it and so on. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What was the choice? What was the alternative? Would Kamala Harris have been better? Are you going to stop voting? Are you going to stop having any kind of input because you don't think you should? Well, if that's the case, congratulations. You just screwed us all because you're not even getting involved in helping in a nation that was inspired, blessed, founded on biblical principles. I do believe that strongly, but we stand in the way. And now here's Donald Trump back again. And these clowns have had 4 years to do what they're doing. And they're ready to yank the rug out of everything and under everything for the Great Reset, aren't they?
Well, you have to understand, Charlie, that communism, the basis of communism, and also the founding principles of the United Nations, which is a communist organization, the founding principle is to prepare the world for the rule of Lucifer by preparing one world, one government, and one religion. Well, we'll all worship the Pope as God on earth. So communism is directly related to the Vatican system. The Islam, Muhammad was married to a Roman nun. Muhammad himself was a Roman. He was red haired and red bearded, born in the walls. His great great grandfather had been one of the people at the meeting of Nicaea, where they
Wow.
structured the Catholic Church. And he was married not only to an 8-year-old, his niece, but he was also married to a 40-year-old nun. And you can go, she was from Chaldea, she was a Chaldean nun. And they still have the records if you want to. You can read the letters between the Pope and the Chaldean nun, where she's instructed to marry Mohammed and bring about what was going on there. So we're coming in a full loop right now because we're fighting all these same structures that have different faces but are actually all the same. So the Vatican structure is the Muslim structure. We see the same, where the women have no power, where the men are in control, where they view themselves as God on earth. The mullahs also. It's the same structure if you look at it closely.
It really
And
is. It really
yes,
is, isn't it? If we look
yes.
at Islam controlled nations, it's exactly what it is. It's just nothing but
It's like
communism.
it
It's
was
not a
in the dark.
religion, it's a form of government.
Exact. And they're openly, it is a government. So that's how you know, because it's reflective of the Vatican system. They financed Mohammed's armies in hopes of getting the Middle East back, and they're still fighting for that today. So they're at the culmination of a 1,000-year plan they had.
Mike,
Yeah.
can Donald Trump at least protect the United States of America from a total global collapse?
The collapse has to happen.
Yes.
See, here's the thing: the everybody in the world who knows anything knows that a fiat system, and we've been living under a fiat system, a full fiat system, for at least 40 years globally. And you got all the little central banks are all connected.
Anybody who doesn't know what's fiat,
Fiat is
not a crappy
currency.
car from Italy.
Yes, that too. It's a currency that has no value in of itself other than opinion. So any currency
where the dollar is worth what they say it's worth.
it's worth what you think it's worth.
Yeah.
And the minute you stop thinking it's worth anything, it's not worth anything.
Right.
So whether it's the dollar, but the system is more complicated than that because it's all based upon the dollar. So all the other baskets of currencies in the world, including the BRICS countries right now, their currencies is measured in dollars. I've got the market up right here, and I can see that that the dollar is worth. I had it here. Currency. The dollar's worth 1.042 U.S. dollar to euro. It's 1.5556 to Japan, and so on and so forth.
It's almost 2-to-1 in Canada.
Right. It's 1.434 right now in Canada. So what I'm saying is, so all these currencies are fake. The only thing backing them is the dollar. The whole world's measured in dollars right now. So, but they know that a fiat currency does not last 50 years. It can't. In order for a fiat currency to have value, it must inflate. Inflation, we want to keep the inflation goal at 2%. The only thing that provides value in a currency, in a fiat currency, see, a value in a silver-backed currency we had in 1964, or a gold-backed currency we had at the turn of the 1900s, the value in that is in the gold and the silver, because you can exchange it for gold and silver. The fiat currency's only value is inflation, in that what you bought today will be worth less tomorrow, or be worth more in dollars tomorrow. The dollar will be worth less tomorrow. That's the only value. If fiat currencies must inflate. But if you inflate it at 2% a year in about 50 years, it's not worth anything anymore. And that's the can they're kicking down the curb. That's what they're fighting against, is that the jig is up, the season is over, and they have to convert to something else. The dollar will collapse. And when the dollar collapses, all the other currencies that are measured by the dollar, they're going to collapse, including the Chinese yen, including the Russian ruble. They're all measured in dollars right now. The BRICS nations are trying to convert to something else because they see it coming. The WEF and those folks, which she's been talking about for the entire show, they know it's coming, so they want to convert it into their World Economic Forum. What are they? You'll own nothing and be happy, Klaus Schwab thing.
They're bringing about the collapse, the Great Reset.
It's not just about bringing it about; it's inevitable.
Yes.
So now you've got Donald Trump and his vision of what we can bring about with this collapse, which what is that? That's a now that he hasn't really outlined that, but I'm hoping we go back to a decentralized gold-based or silver-based or Bitcoin-based, something-based currency on something other that the government can't manipulate. That's what decentralized is so good, is that there is no Federal Reserve Bank that sets the price. The price is set by the marketplace. Anyways, there's a synopsis.
What do you think, Simone? Is President Trump able to protect the United States of America from the global collapse that's going to happen now?
No.
No,
the global collapse is here. We've been in it. That's what we've been living through. It's already here and it's happening.
What do we
That's the reason why your eggs cost $5. But wait, because they're going to cost 10.
No, that's bird flu. That's because they've murdered millions of chickens.
Well,
and by the way, it might be $5 for you in Missouri, but it's more like 11 and 12 here in California.
Well, that's not my fault. You live out there.
Well, and I think your guest is totally right there, Charlie, because he totally gets it. We are in it. There's nothing we can do to stop it. Donald Trump is one man. Everybody that's participated in the system is part of the system, and it's going to have to collapse because we've all done it. People have been buying houses they can't afford, taking credit they can't afford, and I'm not blaming anyone because you can't live. How do you live without doing it? But we are in it. That's why the BRICS nations, the BRICS is wavering right now because their currencies are dropping so much. So,
right, they're planning on switching. They know the collapse is coming. Everything's based on the dollar. The dollar's going to collapse. They know the collapse is coming. They want to be able to switch to something else. and they want to separate themselves from the dollar to eliminate as much damage.
Gold and
as they
silver
can.
will always be valuable just because of the rarity of it, and it's hard to
Well,
get.
gold and silver
Easy
is
to
worth
fire
what
up a
gold and
printing machine and make more paper money, but it's hard to get gold, hard to get silver. You got to mine it. There's a lot that goes into it, which just adds value right there. Law of supply and demand. But as I've told many of my friends who are always telling me, "Oh, Charlie, buy gold, buy silver. You got to get away from the paper currency. You got to start doing the precious metals." And I'm like, and then what? And then what?
Well,
Do you know how to trade like that? You're going to carry around a
absolutely.
bag of gold dust? Are they going to weigh it out at the
No, not dust.
surveyor's office, or
Dimes. I'm going to carry dimes.
dimes?
Dimes.
Dimes.
A silver dime is worth about $2 right now. So when I want to go buy my Dr. Pepper, as we talked earlier, I want to go buy my Dr. Pepper at the Casey's gas station around the corner from my house, and the dollar has collapsed. I can hand them a silver dime, which is worth about $2. $2 is worth about a Dr. Pepper in today's money. So I'm gonna carry. I buy a lot.
But it's got to be a
dimes.
dime that's made before 1964.
Yes, because the dimes after that are just base
You got
metals.
filler in it. Yeah.
And I've known a lot of people who are doing that. You're doing exactly what people I know who have money do. They have bags of dimes in their house.
Yeah, dimes. I have dimes, quarters. It's pre-1964. Dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars. They're all silver. They're 90% silver. And you're asking how it's going to happen. Well, the first week, it's not going. No one's going to care. The second week, the third week, by the fourth week, people are going to want gasoline. People are going to want food, and you got a choice. You can carry your goat down to the market they set up in the central town and trade it for a gallon of gasoline, or you can sell your goat to the neighbor for $2 or $3 silver dollars, and you carry your silver dollars down and get a gallon of gasoline. That's how that's going to happen, because people are going to recognize it, know what it is, know that it has value.
This is
Charlie, did you want to go over this quick map that I pulled up? I know we're getting towards the end, and
Let's
we're
bring that
talking
up now.
about China, and people may not totally understand the graph.
I'll bring it up right now. Here.
Okay.
There it is. Walk us through it, Simone.
Okay, so over this last, say 20 or 30 years, the Chinese have aggressively been buying up farmland. And I know a lot of people really think Texas is this awesome state and it's so free. Well, why did they let China buy the entire state? I think we can hook the George Bush Sr. family into that and their history with China. But look at them on the border of the United States. They've literally sold all of their farmland to China. Utah sold to China. Most of California sold to China. Most of Washington State sold to China. Washington, North Carolina, some of Florida, Missouri here. So these are all states where they own the farmland. And I know we were going to spend some time talking about the fog that's been over the United States. But look at this map of where the fog is. And it's in all the states that the Chinese own the property. I think this was one of the topics we were originally going to discuss.
That is exactly what it was going to be originally about. What the heck is this whole thing with fog?
And then you can see here where we've had all the fires in California.
Yeah.
Is not only all the land the Chinese have bought, but that's also the route for the underground high-speed train. So there's a little jog-off area that goes.
I'm not disagreeing with you on Chinese buying up the property. They are. In Kansas City, 43,000 you had on your map. 43,000 acres. Can you put that map back up, Charlie?
Yeah.
43,000 acres is about the size of Kansas City, which is up there in the left middle corner where the little indentation is. That's where Kansas City is. So it's not really, it seems like a lot, but it's not. And they are buying, by the way, they own land right outside of Whiteman Air Force Base where the B-2s are. So that's an issue. But I want to point out something. Put up the other map. There's something I just want to point out. You're saying your fog is where all the farmland is, or where the Chinese are buying up all the farmland. Well, your gray area there and your blue area, and then the little gray area there in California is where all the farmland. It's just that's where the farmland is.
Right.
I mean, so maybe cause and effect, and not just effect and cause, but all that land right there. Because if you get west of Kansas there, in fact, half of Kansas is desert. The western part of Texas is desert, and it's desert all the way into California. But the most fertile ground is the western half of Missouri, because the eastern half of Missouri is Ozarks. It's mountainy, but the western half, and my county's including that, is where we grow all the corn and soybeans. So that's all. It just happens to be the Chinese are buying up the farmland where the farmland is, and then the fog happens to be where the farmland is. I'm just, I don't know. I'm just putting.
Yeah.
Why would they be buying up farmland in the United States of America when they have massive amounts of land of their own that they could be planting and cultivating?
Well, didn't we talk about the economy collapsing?
Yes, we did.
We talked about gold and silver. Well, land too.
Yeah.
Well,
just
China used to produce all of its own food and oil and everything, and now imports everything. And they've destroyed.
That's because communists can't produce anything but trinkets.
They've destroyed 60% of their groundwater you can't even touch. I just watched something with some Chinese citizens talking about, and they've turned a lot of their farmland into desert because there's no water. So they've literally just destroyed the country by bad management, and now they're having to source everything outside.
Interesting.
But I also think there's a lot of military bases in all the areas that they're.
And there are military bases. There is that. Absolutely. You're right on that. Are we done with this map?
I'm done with it.
All right.
Yeah.
Simone, you too? Okay.
Yep.
I'm
This
done
is
with this
actually
guy.
just a white paper. If anybody wants to look this white paper up, it's called Hypothetical Threat to NatSec During Inaugural Proceedings. And it goes into the drones and what the drones are spraying. So
drones are spraying.
Yeah.
The drones were spotted over New Jersey and now other areas too.
Yeah, I forget what I didn't.
The drones that, by the way, have FAA mandated lighting on them, which I find very interesting.
Well, basically, white papers just are people either in the private sector or military sector or think tank sector, and they just get all the information and they put it together. It doesn't.
Where do we find that?
Excuse me?
Where do we find that?
I think you could just Google it. Regional Transmittal Criminal Organization Utilizing Drones and Explosives is the name of the paper.
Well, one of the things that, speaking of drones, this has been an interesting topic for me, and I'm not going to get into whether or not they're spraying anything. I mean, we use drones. They use drones around here to spray crops.
Yeah, they do.
Watching drone warfare, and I talked about this on my show 2 years ago when the Russian-Ukrainian war started. Drone warfare was in its infancy. I compared it to the first few days of World War I when they were taking off in the biplane and they were flying over, looking over the enemy positions and making maps. But then that evolved into, we can drop a grenade, or taking a 45 and taking pop shots at people. Then they mounted guns on the front of the planes, and then they mounted bombs under the planes. Then they created bombs specifically for planes specifically for dogfighting and planes specifically for bombers. And by the end of World War I, you had an entire massive, innovative scale from nothing to huge production of these aircraft designed for warfare. Well, in the beginning of the Ukrainian war, they were just using them for observation, these drones flying over. And then somebody realized that they could tape grenades onto them and like fly them over and release a grenade. And then they realized they can fight drones with drones, and they were crashing drones into each other to try to stop the other guy's drone. Now they have drones with machine guns on them. They have drones shooting flames down on the enemy. I mean, it's scary.
And lasers to start fires. That's the latest thing I saw.
And I seen this. I got this video of Russian troops in a trench, and they're hunkered down in this trench, and they're shaking from fear as you hear from the drones flying right over their heads. And these are semi-autonomous AI drones that pack a charge of C4, and they're search and destroy drones that look for human beings to go and blow them up. And you can actually, in the end of the video, you can hear the explosions in the background. Talk about scaring the crap out of somebody. You think about drone warfare, how it has evolved over there, and they're talking about now killer swarms of drones. Our enemies are invested heavily into these drone technologies, and there's you talk about your white papers. I've read a couple of that talking about future warfare, that the aircraft carrier will be obsolete.
Yes,
because of drones. If you go watch,
you don't have to ship in literally planes on the deck. You're right.
One of the things one of the things that happened, it was pointed out when Israel and Iran exchanged weapons with each other, long distance, Israel was shooting up $1 million missiles to take down $4,000 drones. You can't maintain that in a war of attrition. That's going to go the wrong way. And so if you take a look at the movie that came out, Battleship, now it's about aliens. Well, the aliens launched these little things onto the ships, right? And they were the ship's defenses were able to shoot down one when they launched one. Was able to shoot down 4 when they launched 4. Was able to shoot down 10 when they launched 10. Then they launched everything they had. And overwhelmed their defenses and blew their ship up. That's what we're talking about with drones. And the difference is you got a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier and a few $1 million in drones. And that's the difference. And drone warfare is scary if you think about the implications.
What's your opinion on why they're why are they trying to tell people they're not drones? Most of the feedback where people are, the newspaper and the media are telling people, oh, they're not drones, you're imagining it, it's a hoax. Why do you think they're trying to not just tell us what's going on and just say, I mean, most likely because there probably are SpaceX drones or something, right? If they're in our airspace and
I don't know that there would be SpaceX, but I think that there are drones. They're something we are doing. Okay. Now, what's the reason why they're doing it? What's the reason why they're being so obscure about it? I think they're trying to set up some future narratives. I can't tell exactly what that is.
Are they being that discreet? Because like I said earlier, and Mike, I think you disagree with me, but the photos and videos I've seen of these drones that were supposedly when the whole thing blew up about New Jersey, they had lights on them, and it was FAA mandated lighting.
I understand, though, right, flying around with the lights on, that means they're ours. But see, then again, you got to ask yourself a question, what's flying around that you don't see? Because I grew up around Edwards Air Force Base. I know all about clandestine aircraft. I had the people in my neighborhood. I had a guy who worked across the street from me. And Monday morning, you go to Palmdale, get on an airplane, fly around for 3 hours, land on an underground hangar. Well, they would land they'd land and go into a hangar underground. And he would work on the compartmentalized, hard for me to say, section of this aircraft that they were building. And that was in the 80s, so stealth bomber or something, who knows. And he was an engineer, and the only thing he knew was that the one system that he was working on. He had no idea what it went to. On Friday, he'd get back on a plane, and they would fly him home. No windows. He has no idea. They could have flew him around in circles and landed him back there at Palmdale. He doesn't know. But that's what he did for a living. So I grew up around clandestine programs where they built that. And now I live out here by Whiteman, and there's a lot of top secret aircraft and type stuff there. There's drones there. There's the B-2 stealth bomber. The Raider is there. They got A-10s there. So I understand what they're doing. So the stuff they're showing you is one thing. It's what they're not showing you is the other question. What else?
These drones are going to make our United States Air Force and any nation's Air Force pretty much obsolete unless they transfer all of that. I had never even considered that, but now you've brought that to mind. These aircraft carriers are going to become gigantic cruise ships with a super large sun deck top. Because what else do you need them for? You don't have to transport any planes into an area. You're right.
Well, in World War I, between World War I and World War II, the innovators and the thinkers of military aviation talked about the need for aircraft carriers, talked about how the battleship was obsolete. People like doggone it, his mind's the one that led the bombing where they launched the Liberators off the aircraft carrier and bombed Japan right after they bombed Pearl Harbor. And I can't think of his name, but he was
Doolittle.
Doolittle. Thank you.
Come on, brother. Doolittle's Raiders.
Doolittle was a genius. And he talked about that the aircraft carrier was going to rule the seas. And the Navy fighting the last war said, no, we need battleships. Well, they didn't even enter the battleships into the battle until after we controlled the air. The Battle of Guadalcanal, the Battle of Midway, it was aircraft carriers and aircraft carrier battle groups. The battleships weren't even involved. So our next war is going to be drones of various, whether they're on the ground or in the air, and it's going to be totally new. And I don't know how that's going to work. I believe America can prevail because we got the best We got the best individual fighters and the best minds in the world. The problem is, will the politicians make us lose it, and the political generals. So hopefully Donald Trump gets rid of some of those folks. But we need to think out of the box for sure.
Haven't we already been using drones like the way they were? I mean, you're more military than me. The way they were bombing people in Iraq and those places.
Yes, yes.
We've already been graduating into this, right?
The term was coined under the Obama administration, getting droned, and that's where he was droning people left and right, usually American citizens over there in the Middle East. And the problem is that those Reaper drones are $1 billion.
I'm not laughing because American citizens were getting murdered. I'm laughing at the sheer audacity of the way people were cheering. But you're right, American citizens or innocents were being taken out, including that one man with his entire family. Who I'll never forget that. And that was all under Obama.
Those Predator drones are really expensive, take a lot of logistics. And the stuff that they're doing in Ukraine, the stuff that they're doing in the Middle East, the drones are $4,000. There's not much to them. I mean, it's just boom. That's all they are.
Hey, where do they get those components for the drones, by the way, Mike Cook?
Well, Iran is making a lot of them.
Are they?
A lot of the drones that the Russians are using are made in Iran.
With
a lot of the drones
with components from where?
Oh, I imagine China. I don't know for sure. It don't take much components though. That's the thing. They're pretty. Okay. They're pretty basic.
The electrical, the cameras, the weaponry. That's not China. Okay.
It's and the stuff that they're making in Ukraine, they're making in house too. So it's the poor man's war. It really is. Yeah. But when you think, oh, that's just not going to work for me. Well, the Romans were beat by the barbarians because they were overwhelmed. The Romans had the best military in the world, the most highly trained. A Roman phalanx, when they got into their fighting stance, they could not be defeated. So they attacked them on their supply chains. The barbarians did.
Stop the food, stop the water, stop the supplies, stop the ammunition. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you think there's some weakness in our military stance, and that kind of the military industrial complex and a lot of our leaders are kind of stuck because they're making a lot of money in the current system? And
there's a weakness because there's a weakness because we transitioned from fighting global peers to fighting the war on terror. Our equipment became lighter and faster and more nimble, designed to take on untrained groups of people just lobbing fire at you. But now we're looking at fighting global peers, Russia, China. Well, they're not like us. Yes, they are. They have main battle tanks. They have fifth generation fighter aircraft. They have highly trained militaries. Now you can say, oh, we can defeat them no matter what. Then we're getting into logistics. We're getting into a bunch of other stuff. So
say what you will about our military being strong and all that. I don't think so. I think it's been weakened tremendously by people at the very tippy top who have
that's what I was getting into. We
any kind of general or colonel that even resembles patriotic pride, they got to go. Started with General Flynn.
Right.
It has been neutered. Our military. We're not ready. And in the meantime, China sunk billions of dollars into building what they claim to be, and I've seen evidence of it that they're right, the most powerful Navy in the world, and they're working on the rest of the military as well to try and
they launched their first nuclear submarine, and it sank to the bottom of the ocean in the first hour.
It did. I'm not saying.
But let me say this. The Chinese, got to understand, this is what I'm getting at. Is focus, and we got Pete Hegseth saying, I'm going to make the military the most lethal. And what he's going to do is he's going to focus the military into fighting two peer-on-peer battles simultaneously and create a military that can sustain that. China is focused on one thing and one thing only, sinking American aircraft carriers. That is their whole design of their military.
That to me seems like a poor choice. And that might be one of the reasons why financially they're collapsing. They sunk all their money into this military. Maybe. And it's based on this discussion, sounds like drones trumps everything. So
except that if China wants to make their expansion things happen, then in the next 25 years, they can't do it when we have two Pacific aircraft carrier battle groups. They can't do it. even with
Between
the
them and
drones.
Taiwan. Yeah.
Exactly. But if they can take out those 2 aircraft carriers, the Pacific Ocean is open for them. Just like the Japanese knew they couldn't control the Pacific if they didn't take out the American aircraft carriers in the Battle of Midway and of Hawaii. They knew they could not control the Pacific if they didn't take out those aircraft carriers. It's the same thing. We're evolving. The war's it's going the drone way, but it's not there yet. It's not there
Okay.
yet. They know they
And
got to take out those aircraft.
India too, Vindog. There's, by the way, thank you to everybody who's been contributing in the chat room. I haven't had time to really even read the questions because this has been a strong discussion and I'm loving it.
India has nukes, and so does Pakistan.
Never forget that.
And Ukraine had
China,
nukes at one time.
Did they?
China's population is dying off. They can't do anything. The Western
Yeah, they
world,
rescinded
I
that. You
think,
can only have 2 kids or 1 kid rule.
They don't have anybody to work in their factories. That's one of the reasons everyone's going to India and these different countries. The Chinese people, they literally are forcing the women to have children. I just was reading something now. Bill Gates' partner went to China a few years back and set up a system where they would track the women's ovulation. And this was during the abortion time. If the child was female, they would be notified and the woman would have to go.
Which is so hilarious because Bill Gates is all championing the depopulation of the world.
Well, of course. Well, it was his partner, not him.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. Here's another thing to think about China and going to war. They have over 1 billion men, more than they have women at the fighting age male level. So that means, you see, Aaron, who was in the comment section, asked me one time. He's an Orthodox Jew. He's of the tribe of Levite. He says, "Why are there so few Jews on the planet?" And I said, "Well, they killed off 6 million of them during World War II. I mean, you add the babies to the babies to the babies, that makes the population small." And I said, "Here's another thing. Why was in the Bible? Why did the kings and the rich in the Old Testament Bible?" And this wasn't just the Jews. This is just a microcosm of what society was like at the time. Harems were the thing. Why was that? Well, because the men would go off and fight the battles, and 50,000 of your men would die, and there wasn't enough men for women to produce babies to make new warriors to fight the next battle. Right. So you would have 25 women in your harem to knock them all up to make babies.
Right.
Well, what they did over there, they now have 1 million or 1 billion men that they don't have women for. So you can go to war and expend those men and not have a detrimental onto your society for growing.
Anytime in history, there's been.
Something you said earlier, Simone, just real quick, ties into that because you said communism represses women. There's a fine example in China. They were of such a mindset that girl babies were worthless. They would kill them. That was very common.
Oh yeah, because
everybody wanted a boy.
That's why they have excess.
Yeah.
Well, communism is ruled by Saturn, Satan, right, which is a male energy. So that's anti.
Dude, what?
I'm not saying bad or women. I'm not saying about. I love men. You know me. But literally, when you look at the things
that didn't sound right,
that control our planet believe in, there is a struggle between the divine feminine and the masculine, and this is a battle that's going on among the elite.
That's in Revelation about the devil going to war against the woman who is producing the child, the Son of God. That's in Revelation, waiting there for the woman to give birth so she could take them both out. Wow, you just brought up something I've never even heard before. The whole Saturn what thing? Who?
Saturn, Satan. Yeah.
Well, Saturn.
It's all in the Greek. Yeah.
Saturn is Zeus, and Zeus is
Jesus.
No, it's not Jesus. Zeus is Zeus. And then the Egyptian gods, the same god, and I'm trying to think it was the Isis or which one it was.
Yeah, Isis.
But
the woman.
Let me tell you that this comes from, and you're gonna see what I'm gonna say here in a second. This comes from Genesis and the Tower of Babel, when the son of Shem had a grandson, and it was Nimrod, and he set himself up as a god, and it was a mommy god, his wife, a baby god, his baby, and himself. There's a daddy god, a mommy god, and a baby god. The gods of Egypt was a daddy god, a mommy god, a baby god. The gods that the Canaanites worshipped, a daddy god, a mommy god, a baby god. The gods that the Greeks worshipped had a daddy god, a mommy god, a baby god. The gods that the Romans worshipped had a daddy god. It was all the same god system. And the Catholic Church has a mommy god, a daddy god, and a baby god.
It's the
Anywhere
same
you
system.
see the mommy god, the daddy god, the baby god, that's not Christianity. That's paganism. That's what God hated. That's what he talked about in the Bible. Don't do that. And because my Savior is not a baby, he's a risen Lord sitting on the right hand of the Father, where he makes his enemies his footstool. So there is no mama God in Christianity. There's God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit.
Which is a feminine energy.
No, it's not feminine energy. That is, he calls himself the Father. He calls himself the Son. So he's not that. It's the Holy and the Holy Spirit. So that is the God of the Bible. But this other one, and when you say the feminine energy, if you take a look at the statue that the Satanists set up all over this country, it's the goat god. It's Behemoth, if I'm saying it right. That is the same one that they sacrificed their children to in the Old Testament.
Baal.
And the one that raises the Baal, same God, raises his hands up like this and does like this, which is what Kamala Harris did when she said I want to leave what's behind for what's in the future. However she said that, she was doing that little sign like that. But if you take a look at that God, it's got breasts and a penis. It's ambiguous. That's the way that's the way that is. Yeah. So it's a total mockery of the God Jehovah of the Bible. That's,
of course it is. Everything Satan does is a mockery of God.
So anytime you see the mama God, the baby God, the daddy God, know that is a false trinity. So there you go.
Simone, you went away for a second when Mike
I don't know.
disagreed
I
with
just
you.
disappeared, and then I came.
You went
back.
away, and I was like, "Did she get mad and leave?" So I'm glad you came back, because I'm like, I don't think that's Simone.
You know
Simone would challenge you.
I had some funnier kind of just gossip for the end of the show to end us on a lighter note. I know we're kind of running here late.
We have been going over an hour and a half, and yeah, my shows don't normally go that long because I don't have people.
Except when you have me on.
Except when I have you on, exactly. So I've enjoyed this so much, and I'll tell you what,
have you seen the Daily Mail reporting
about what?
Of why Michelle Obama wasn't at the inauguration?
Yes.
That Barack Obama and Jennifer Aniston are together, and that the Obamas are filing for divorce.
I had heard
that is the rumor.
Yeah, that's
the
rumor.
Daily Mail is the one. I know it's kind of a gossip paper, but they've broken a lot of big stories over the years. So
yes, they have. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question. Has Jennifer Aniston, with all the husbands and boyfriends she's had, ever had any children?
No.
Not that we know of. Not that we know of.
Because I'd take a closer look. We got Big Mike there that Obama's married to, and I'd take a real close look at the cast of Friends. If you understand, she comes from a Greek generational acting family, so there's probably some gender inversion going on there.
Shut up, both of you.
Yeah.
I didn't say it. She said it. I just alluded to it.
I noticed I was living in communist
Then that is the most
Russia
successful cross-dresser I've ever seen.
Well, you got to understand. Amazing. Take a look at these Hollywood stars now. You got Will Smith's son. You've got I don't know. There's several others that have all converted, right? But one of the things that they do, it's part of their worship of their God. And this is stuff they used to do in ancient times, but they take these kids and they start them off transitioning as soon as they're born. They start giving them the drugs and they do all this stuff and all the stuff that's involved with that. They do it to these kids. And when you start them off young enough, the effects are dramatic.
I noticed the person we're talking about. I was living in communist Russia and hadn't been watching regular television. I came back in the mid 90s and I saw the whole cast of Friends. I'm like, those are the weirdest looking women I've ever seen. Because I had been around regular women. Russian women are beautiful. So I had been around a lot of really attractive women. And what you'll notice in Hollywood is that most of the women don't have hips or breasts anymore. Remember, we had the overwhelming Marilyn Monroe style body, and take a close look. And so once you understand gender inversion and the fact they're forcing it on us right now, is like your friend said here, Mike, is that they've been doing it forever. And we're going to be finding out that people like the royal family and other high level people in our society, especially in Hollywood and our public view, have been and are gender inverting their children since birth. So it's basically child abuse. So
No, I
that's why
used
they're
to
trying to normalize it.
I used to tell a joke 10, 15 years ago all the time. So you ever notice how all the supermodels look like emaciated 12-year-old boys? And my joke was that's because all of the artists that make the clothing are homosexuals and pedos. But as it turns out, they probably were emaciated 12-year-old boys. But I'm moving on.
Okay, well, do you know what Victoria's Secret was? Queen Victoria, Lex Wexner, Victoria's Secret.
Well, I'm
They
sure
wear the
I'm sure it's along that
Earth.
lines.
Wait a minute. Go.
I know there's
again,
a song.
Simone, say it again. About the angels.
Victoria's Secret was she was a man. The royal families of Europe have been practicing gender inversion for a long time.
Queen
That
Victoria?
was Victoria's Secret. And many of the Victoria's Secret models. I have a friend. I can tell you she's an elite physical therapist to the stars, to the athletes. And she has done numerous Victoria's Secrets famous models that have the scar where their penis was removed because she sees them naked. And this is what the book Becoming Michelle was about. Becoming Michelle. She wasn't Michelle before. So this has been prominent in our society for a long time. We're just seeing it. I suggest you look back at some of the famous women in history and
well, a sure dead giveaway is, did they have any kids?
Right.
Did they produce any kids themselves? Not adopt them from Africa and wear them like a purse. Did they have any kids?
Exactly.
I'm just saying, if they didn't produce any kids, like, for example, I'm just saying this, and my buddy Mike's out there, he's watching, and he'll disagree with me. Does Kamala Harris have any kids?
Well, you're aware that Kamala Harris's mother was in charge of doing, according to Judge Brown, who watched her career entirely.
The Judge Brown's had lots to say about her.
Well, that she was.
I've written him. I tried to get him on the show.
University in Canada. She was running the Nazi programs at the McGill University, and her daughters were probably in it. I believe Kamala Harris is a Manchurian candidate, and I could link her family through the Thuggee Society for 1,000 years to the British intelligence and the intelligence communities. The Thuggee
But yet
Society.
she lost. But yet she lost. So maybe they don't have total control over us like they thought they did.
I meant control over their world, and I believe that Kamala Harris lost for a lot of reasons, mainly because they arrested the guy at Dominion and Symantec, or what was the program? They arrested both of those guys that were in charge of those programs for the voting machines. So
Kim Clement said they will do everything in their power to put a witch in the White House. And you think about where Kamala Harris is from and what her family's religion is.
A lot of voodoo.
Well, and do you understand the Thuggee Society? Her family was one of the founding members of the Thuggee Society. They killed over 2 million Indians. They were robbers and identity assumers. They would find travelers like the Khazarians. The reason the Khazarians were forcibly converted in the Ukraine area by the Russian Tsar. They would kidnap people and then they would murder everybody and take what they have. So that's Kamala Harris's family line. Her family name is Gopal, but before that it was Godse. And if you can look it up, the guy that assassinated Gandhi's name is Godse. They changed their name 5 years before. But the British government supposedly took the Thuggee Society down, but I believe they just incorporated them into their intelligence, Vatican Roman system, blackmail, extortion, murder, and all that. So that's literally where she comes from. So these people just didn't get put they're put in place a long time ago. Why do you think Joe Biden ran for president over a 50-year period when nobody wanted him? He never
Right.
got more than 1% of the vote
Well,
because at some point he knew he was going to be put in as president. That's the way the system works.
why that was in 2019, the Democrat Party had a huge collection of complete morons up there running for president. He was their salvation. They they needed somebody who could convince Americans that he's in the middle, like Bill Clinton said he's in the middle, and they weren't. Once they get in, they're not. Then we find out, and it's too late. But no, that's the reason why I think Joe Biden won. But you're telling me it was going to happen regardless.
I believe that Joe Biden was put in place to do exactly what he did: collapse the economy, bring in inflation, normalize relations with China.
Well, he
China
did
kind of
too.
had a setback during Trump's administration. So I
And
think
just
it
what he
wasn't a
did during
good
the
move.
last 2 weeks or even 2 days of his presidency, the things that he put into place and the criminals that he pardoned and the all the things that he did, we're only beginning. We're going to see repercussions from all of that. I don't know
Well,
if
he comes from a long line of criminal cartel activity, and he's just
He
one of them.
didn't do anything.
he didn't do
Right.
anything. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
He doesn't even know what flavor pudding he had for breakfast. I mean, the
I
guy
think
is,
there's somebody under the desk or some kind of powerful magnet to his strand. They're probably making his arm move when he signs these things from underneath.
they
the
have
desk.
auto signers. They don't need him.
Well, you've seen the clips where they were releasing where someone was taking a video and they were just telling him, Joe, just sign it. Like someone was over his shoulder and just telling him, just sign this.
Right.
So
Right.
it's kind of scary, but I think that right now we're just watching the things play out. And what do you think, Mike?
It was George W. Bush in an interview with Glenn Beck back in the early 2000s when Glenn Beck was talking about the operations of the White House. And George W. said, it doesn't matter who sits in this chair, the decisions are already made. Glenn Beck will tell that story, said he was shocked.
Well, if you've ever seen a pyramid of the structure of the system, like the politicians, there's a 12 layer structure. I've seen people who came out of the system. There's a really famous guy who used to be a music producer, and he does all these graphs and shows how the different levels work. And politicians are at level 2, and there's about 12 levels. So really the people that are put in front of us are very minor.
Well, I've said that all along, that Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and all the rest are just, they're not in control. They're puppets. They're the front group. You know, like the mafia would have the pizzeria as the front group, and all the stuff happening in the back is where it was really happening. But I will say this, that Donald Trump upset their system by design of God, I believe. And
I'll take it back even further, real quick, Mike. I'll take it back even further. The United States definitely disrupted their system.
Yes.
The birth of the United States and the fact that we have a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Thank you, Vendog, for pointing that out. We're not a democracy. Stop saying that. Stop allowing others around you to say it. We're a constitutional republic. We have kept them, the devil, and the people doing his work, from that total wresting control away from God. And you're right, Donald Trump was a huge monkey wrench in 2016, and he is again. I pray that he does what he says he's going to do.
Let me say that the first term of Donald Trump, he would sign executive orders, he would give commands to the executive branch as the CEO. He doesn't even have to sign executive orders. He just says, you go do that, and they're supposed to go do that. Every ABC agency is unconstitutional. The only way they could get them there was by creating them under the executive branch. So they're under the executive branch of government. So therefore, Donald Trump should be able to give an order, and they say how high. But at every level, and I had a video I did on my show today, at every level, they stopped him the last time around. They stopped him. It didn't happen. And so now Donald Trump, he just announced he's firing 1,000 people in the DOJ system.
Thank you, Lord.
He's cleaning house. They got Mike Turner that they just released from the Intel Committee. He was trying to set up a shadow government. They got rid of. He's a Republican. So I think Donald Trump this time is going to clean house of those people who won't do what they're supposed to do
All you got to do is pull the money.
Constitution.
And the first time around, Donald Trump did not have total control of the House and Senate during his entire presidency, because
he didn't have control of it at all. They fought against him.
Right.
The Republicans controlled the House and the Senate and actively fought against Donald Trump.
And you had guys like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and so on and so forth.
In the 2020, when Barack Obama passed Obamacare, the Republicans put 680 bills forward. When Joe Biden was or Donald Trump was Barack Obama was president, to repeal Obamacare. Of course, they would never pass because Obama would never sign them. When they controlled the House, the Senate, and Donald Trump was president, they put one bill, and that was the one John McCain was the deciding vote on and shot it down.
John McCain is the one that ruined
because
that.
They all knew it was going to be John McCain to shoot it down because it was never supposed to happen.
Whole time he was saying he was going to support it.
The Obamacare, they only had two things left to get rid of once they got control of our medical system to take over this country. That was the Constitution and the guns. And we have guns because we have guns, so good luck. But they wanted that power. See, the Republicans say, oh, the Democrats, they want power, they want to spend the money. And then when they get in there, they do the exact same thing because they all want the power. They all want the power. And again, as we said, there are people above them controlling the George Soroses and the World Economic Forum, but those are front groups too.
Yes.
And so they're all bought and paid for in various ways and levels. And all of this nastiness is going on. But Donald Trump did something this last time around. The first thing he did was take over the RNC. And when he took over the RNC, he controlled the money. And all of a sudden, all the Republicans immediately bowed to Donald Trump. The MSNBC screaming, all the Republicans are turning in favor of Donald Trump. There's nobody standing up and fighting because he controlled the RNC and he controlled the money. And it's all about the money, right? And then the second thing that he did now that he's achieved power is that he's eliminating the bastions of the deep state inside the government, their control over this government. And now we're going to see the release of the things she was talking about, the Epstein stuff, the Diddy stuff. Of course, those are all blackmail operations. And see who's cheating who and who's being true and who don't even care anymore. That's what's going on. And when Kash Patel, John Ratcliffe, and Tulsi Gabbard get control of the intel of this country and all that information, that's when the great exodus will begin, and there'll be sitting members, elected officials that resign immediately. And I'm talking about the next week or so.
Well, I believe there's been...
Simone, if I could just throw this out, let's see if it ties in with what you're about to say. That ties in with the whole economic collapse, global collapse, because that is going to shadow over any other kind of good news that might be happening here when none of us have anything and we're all completely struggling just to eat and stay alive. That seems like what a great way to completely throw a horrible wet blanket over everything that Donald Trump is going to try and do with his administration.
Well, I think we've seen a lot of the collapse. You were speaking about John McCain and how he was leading the effort against Trump. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the John Kasich interview the morning after John McCain passed. Have either one of you seen that?
No. I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. John McCain, as you recall, or John Kasich ran for governor, or was a governor and a congressman, I believe, from Ohio. He ran for president in the Republican Party.
He did run for president, yeah.
But the day after John McCain died, he went on, I believe it was one of the nighttime shows, the guy with the big head, I forget, on Fox. And he
that's
said...
all of them.
That's all of them.
Hannity. I think he went on Hannity, was the show he was on. And he went on Hannity and he said, John McCain was put to death less than 24 hours ago. The next day, he changed political parties. And if you remember, they had a big pushback on 4chan. 4chan had posted that John McCain had been convicted of crimes and that he was going to be executed on a certain date and time. 6 months later, he died on that time. The next morning, Kasich went on TV and he never withdrew his comment. He switched parties and became a speaker. So I believe that maybe some of this stuff has already been occurring. John McCain was not a good person, and he'd been involved in the Ukraine and a lot of illegal activity with Mitt Romney and their children illegally taking money from the Ukrainian government, then laundering it back through their hedge funds in the United States, then loaning it back in loans they
10%
knew
for the
they
big
couldn't
guy.
repay.
Yeah,
And then when they
10%
couldn't
for the big
repay the
guy.
loan, they were taking their assets. How do you think our politicians own factories and stuff in Ukraine? Because they
I
were
want to know how
holding.
any of them are multimillionaires when they only make about 140 a year salary. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi. How's that work?
So, yeah.
Um,
I always wondered who
seriously,
Nancy Pelosi really was, because supposedly she was a housewife, and then she's the most powerful woman in the country at 50. Most people start their careers earlier. So I don't believe Nancy Pelosi was just nobody. Her
Well, she
father
was a mover and shaker in California politics way before then. So
was
have
she?
been
Well, her
with the
father
Brown
ran
family,
Baltimore
with the
for
Brown family and the
the
Newsom
mob.
family.
Yeah, I mean, her father ran Baltimore for the mob. She dated Kennedy when she was young. You can see them pictures when they're dating. Her father,
Which Kennedy?
Alessandro, what?
Which Kennedy?
JFK.
Okay.
They were matched at a young age. Her father was, I think, the minister of labor or something under, right? He was one of the people investigated for the Kennedy assassination, actually. So those families go way back. So I'm just saying, I think there's a lot of interesting links that are kind of coming up. And Mike was pointing out that these things are coming down right now. But I personally believe that these systems have been coming down for several years, and that's why they're just freaking out so much. Because
I have sent a message to my guest who was supposed to start about 30 minutes ago and asked if I could reschedule for another time, and she agreed. And that was what I was doing with the phone over here because I didn't want this to stop. There's one other thing I want to talk to you both about. Now, we can do it as another time, or you might not even feel comfortable talking about this. We can do a whole second show on this, or we can continue right now based upon you two and how much time you have.
I'm not doing anything.
yeah, I'm good. I'm really enjoying. I'm learning
Okay.
something from
Okay.
Mike, and I mean, he has
Okay. Here it
military
is.
insight in a different part
Yeah.
of the
Oh, he
world.
does. Oh, Mike's great. And Simone, you're great. You're both. I'm just so excited that you're both on my show at the same time. This is
I'm
really
just
cool.
some schmuck on the internet. That's what I say.
That's
Well,
right.
we were talking about the Kennedys here, and now I don't know if you guys are familiar, and this is one of those crazy things, but I think I did text you these pictures earlier today, Charlie. But have you seen JFK Jr. has a blue checkmark account on X, and he's been
You're talking about
releasing
John
information.
F. Kennedy Jr., the one who died in a plane crash. That one, right? No,
Yes,
you
and
don't mean
again,
RFK.
if you remember, this is an interesting story. Right after that happened, I was trying to find it, but I didn't have time this morning. But you can Google it yourself. Donald Trump went on Larry King Live a few days after the plane crash, and he read a letter that JFK Jr. wrote him the day before about the death of loss of his father. And Larry King says, well, what do you mean? He wrote it to you yesterday. And Trump says, he wrote this letter to me yesterday, but he had supposedly died 3 days before. So there's
Right.
always been this theory. And I mean, I have no idea whether it's true or not, but he does have an active X account that's supposedly a verified account. And
Well,
he's been
verified accounts on X means you paid for it because I got one too.
That's all it is.
Well, okay. Well, the interesting thing is, and so I'm just throwing this out there. This is just kind of, a little lighter stuff for what we've been talking about. But a lot of them, right now, yesterday, RFK Jr. posted, or JFK Jr. on that channel posted a picture of JD Vance with the mask being removed. And they're also announcing that Nasara Jassara will be implemented on January 25th. So
What
have
is
you guys
that?
heard anything about that?
Oh, what is that?
Nasara Jassara is supposedly the new financial system that we're going to be.
They've been announcing that it's going to be released in the next 3 weeks for 6
Yes.
years. So
Exactly.
I don't
And
buy it.
so
I
I
don't buy
don't
it.
believe that either, but this is kind of this thing that it's going on. So I'm just wondering, do you guys have any theories about that?
Well,
And why that
Nasara, let me tell you, Nasara, and I'm going to piss some people off. I even saw somebody in the comment section talking about it. It sounds an awful lot like this to me. You'll own nothing and be happy.
exactly. And do you
Because we're going to pay all this off. Do you understand economically? I'm an Austrian economics kind of guy.
So
Okay.
Do you understand the principle? What happens if you pay everybody's debt off? You want to know what inflation is? You're going to find out. If you pay everybody's debts off, it's going to go through the roof. It's going to go absolutely through the. Well, it's God's money. Well, then you read the Bible and see what it says about debt. You're supposed to pay it off.
If you really look into
or
Nasara
don't get into it in the
Jasara,
first place.
Well, there's
do you
that too.
understand who's behind it? Have you ever heard of Saint Germain?
I haven't gone far enough into it to know who's behind it. I
Okay.
just look at the principles behind it and say, I don't want those principles.
So this was basically a concept from several hundred years ago. This guy was a friend with Voltaire and all these communists. So I think you're on target with this. I'm not a Nasara Jasara person, but this in the independent community, everybody's for it. And I know people that aren't making their car payments because they think it's going to come in. I mean, ridiculous stuff, right? So
I used
I
to
don't.
repo cars for a living, so that's good. That's good job security. So
So I think that Nasara Jasara. So if you understand, Saint Germain has been recorded in history, in the annals of a lot of like the royals and people at high levels of society. He supposedly never died and was 500 years old, and he was from Transylvania, where the royal family of Europe, the British family, is originally from Romania, Transylvania. So these are really bizarre things, but basically Nasara Jasara will take us from the Vatican trust that we currently live and are owned by to the new trust of the Rodriguez and the Saint Germain trust. And I've never been able to find out much about the Rodriguez trust, but apparently that maybe they're one for the global and one for the national group. I'm not sure exactly. So I just thought maybe you guys had some input because a lot of people are super excited about this, and I just don't think they're right.
it sounds like a
It
fancy
doesn't sound
system.
right. If you forgive debt, who's taking on the debt? Someone's going to get paid back somehow.
Well,
And
nothing is free. Nothing is free. So let's say you forgive all the debt.
right.
Well, you just flooded the economy with value. However you do it. Well, when you flood the economy, is too few goods being chased by too much money creates inflation. It's going to be an economic nightmare, and people don't understand that. And the only way that you can do this, by the way, successfully is with modern monetary theory. Modern monetary theory says you can print as much money as you want to print, and it has no effect on the economy if, here's the if, you control the means of production and you control the price. Now, what does that sound like to you?
Yeah, communism.
That's communism.
Again, he was friends with Voltaire, right?
So if you're going to push, you're going to make this panacea. By the way, there is no panacea. There is no utopia coming. The only utopia is when Christ returns. There's no utopia coming. It's not going to happen. There's no panacea. Take a look at every utopian movie ever where they try to create a panacea in utopia. It doesn't work out very well.
Star Trek, the Federation of Planets, Star Trek, it works out well.
That's why they call that fiction. But anyways,
Science fiction, even.
Yeah. So
that is their dream here in California. I'm convinced that Governor Hairdo wants to make us one big Star Trek,
one worldwide federation that he
where we're all wearing the
happens to be in
same
charge
thing
of.
and everything's perfect, and we all take things are flying around. That's their dream. But as we know, any kind of socialist or communist government, and we don't have to look back that far to see how it fails every single time.
You know, the economy in Star Trek
Doesn't
works
work.
because they can materialize food.
Right.
The food materializes.
That's a pretty cool rig.
The problem is that violates the laws of thermodynamics. It's impossible to material. You can't create something out of nothing. You have to create something out of something.
Well, and they still go around conquering all the lesser races on Star Trek.
Well, you know,
Most
there's
of the time you go to another place, the people aren't
Oh, you're
advanced
not
that way.
operating exactly how we think you should operate. So yeah, you're right. We're going to control you. We're going to bring you down. We're going to ruin you. Good point, Simone. Here's what I wanted to bring up when I asked if you had time, because it's been on my mind. I do this thing. If you follow me on Facebook and on YouTube, Charlie Simons, CHARLEE on YouTube, it's at Charlie Simons. I do this thing called Godcast. And this is my fourth time I do a chapter a day, because I say a chapter a day keeps false teachers away. You can't be fooled by some slick-haired, skinny jean wearing goofball telling you what the Bible says 22 minutes a week if you're reading it for yourself. And I'm now into Revelation, and the Holy Spirit is just like slapping me all around about stuff that I'm like, hi, yeah. But I'm reading it to everybody and anybody who wants to watch. And it's called Godcast, not a broadcast, not a podcast. It's all about God, Godcast. And just recently, if I remember right, I just read it, chapter 14, talking about they will want to die, but yet they will be unable to. They'll be so tortured and so miserable that people will want to die, but yet they will not be able to.
That's what
Now,
AI is.
not even more than that. Have you seen what's happening in China now? They are, for lack of a better word, cloning the human brain just from somebody's DNA. And it is a brain that controls a robot or a machine that's got human brain capacity in it. And it is much cheaper than AI. It doesn't take all the energy, and AI takes tremendous amounts of electricity and energy to produce and to work. This is literally eclipsing the abilities of AI for a whole lot less money, and China's at the forefront of it. And that's what entered into my head when I read that story and saw that story. I went, they will want to die, but will be unable to. This is transhumanism.
Yes. I
Well,
agree
And
with
I'm
you
new to the
completely.
game on this.
Transhumanism, go back to that story I told you about the mama God, the baby God, and the daddy God. Transhumanism is what God wiped out with the flood.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. So it's biblically, not man's millions and millions of years, but biblically, the time from Noah to today is approximately, what is it, 3,000 years, give or take. The time from Adam to Noah is approximately 3,000 years. Is it conceivable that the people that lived between Adam and Noah before the flood developed technologies in the same as us, considering that they lived for 1,000 years? And so the wealth, the knowledge transfer would be different. They could have went off in different directions technology wise, but is it conceivable that they were as technology advanced as we are?
Yes.
3,000 years. Okay.
I believe.
What would happen if you flooded the earth a mile deep for a year with salt water to technology?
Destroy everything.
There'd be no trace of it, except
Right.
they call them gifts of the kings. Around the world over the last millennia or so, they've found devices buried in the ground. They got one device that's got these bronze teeth on it. It's like a really intricate type watch thing, and they've x-rayed it, and they said that even today we couldn't machine the stuff that's in it. They don't know what it does, but it's embedded in rock that they say is millions of years old, which I don't think their carbon dating is accurate, by the way.
Because it's
They found
man-made.
another one. They found another one that's the head of a hammer. The wood part is rotted away, but there's this head of a hammer inside of a stone. The stone's millions of years old, and the hammer has alloys we don't know nothing
Or
about.
6,000, 7,000 years old.
Yeah, or 4,000 years old, whatever the case is. But so my point in that, my point in that is saying that if you study like some of the extra biblical texts talking about the pre-flood times, the sons of heaven came down and mated with the women. These were demons, and the Nephilim, and they created these hybrids, and they changed the DNA of man. And what are the same people that follow the same philosophies today are now trying to change the DNA of man. And this is a part they want to insult God, and it can get into some whole spiritual conversation about that we probably don't have time to chase down. But so what I'm saying is that what was then, Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun. What was then is still today. So what you're talking about is they're trying to change man from the vision of let's create God, let's create man in our image to create a new God out of man. And that's what the Tower of Babel was. They wanted to build a tower tall enough that God couldn't flood them out again. That's what the
Well,
Tower of
also,
Babel was.
it's a portal for the gods to step from heaven. If you understand the Tower of Babel construction and you look into this ancient stuff, it's actually a portal to the gods so they could step down to the ground. This is what they believe.
Well, the term used in the Bible is something along the lines of so that we can be like God. So both examples are probably true. But anyways, there's some ancient stuff there.
They're not that ancient. It could go back to the 70s. They're
That's
buying
fine,
a stairway to heaven.
right? Well, that's a whole nother story.
For those who worship Led Zeppelin, and it's transhumanism. Now that we're seeing, because things are in Revelation that I've been reading for years, and I've been thinking, how's that possible? How's that going to happen? So on and so forth. But now I'm seeing, holy cow, this is what everything's been working to this point. It's going to happen. It's biblical prophecy. That's what the book of Revelation is. It was a vision to the Apostle John while he was incarcerated in prison on the Isle of Patmos, and the angel came down, gave him, write this down. Write this down is what he told John. And he did. Here's what I saw. Here's what I saw. Here was. And how many years now has the church, the Christian church in the United States of America, completely left out any kind of preaching about Revelation? Oh, it's too scary. Oh, it's just frightening. Oh, we can't really talk about that. We'll lose congregants.
Well, there's a whole doctrine in the Western Church that's only been around since the late 1800s. But prior to this, nobody thought of this pre-trib rapture and the exact time frame. They lay out a time frame, the way things are going to happen. And this is what I say to that, because God gave me a revelation a while back that prophecy was meant to be watched for, not interpreted, because I was trying to interpret prophecy. And God's like, no, that's not what I said to do. I said to watch for it. So you watch for it and say, And I give you an example of that. There was a prophet and a prophetess that was inside the temple grounds when Jesus was brought as a baby to the temple to be dedicated. And they both saw Jesus, and they both proclaimed that he was the Messiah, because they were watching for the events to happen and trusting in God. When Jesus was grown and he stood face to face with people, the elders of the church and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and whatnot stood face to face, their Messiah. And they rejected him because they had a preconceived notion of what the Messiah was going to be and what the Messiah was going to do. So when you take Revelation and you read it and you say this, you're setting yourself up for failure, because your interpretation may be as wrong as theirs.
Completely.
Do you understand the Kabbalistic interpretation of Revelation?
The Kabbalistic? I don't have any idea what the Kabbalistic interpretation is.
Well, they believe that Revelation is an instruction book for about what they're supposed to bring about in the world for them to have the final battle with God.
Well, yeah, that's what the Muslims believe.
They see it as an instruction manual. So that's why we see all these horrible things happening, because the bad people see it. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I can get into some prophetic teaching that I'm not going to do at this time. That we'll talk about some of that from the other side. I don't understand how they think, but I know how prophetic things work, and I know how God has told me things. So I can't. But this is not the show for that right now. I'm not going to get into all that. It's too deep, too heavy stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, it's been such a positive, uplifting show up to this point. Yeah, I'd hope to see you bring it up.
I tried to get some lighter romantic stuff.
You did. I appreciate that.
It's something that was so off the wall. I mean, when I was reading it, I had just been with this Black liberal lady I know who runs some NGOs in Oakland. And I was telling her, she asked me what I thought about Michelle Obama, and I confirmed what she thought about Michelle Obama. I said, well, wait till you hear this story. And she was just flabbergasted. She's texted me every day, but apparently it's still out there in the Daily Mail. And this is the rift that's going on between the Obamas. So something just lighter and gossipy. But I think that we're in a really serious time right now, and that a lot of people really, really don't understand that, yes, Donald Trump's come into office. A lot of people are really happy about that. We can see the different changes going on, but the reality is that this is an effort that's going to have to come from the ground up, and that we all have to get involved in our local communities and start addressing the wrong things that we've all been looking at. You might lose a few friends, you might lose a few customers if you have a business, but we are at war right now. And I don't think that's what a lot of people understand, is that we are literally in a war for the kind of lifestyle and for our future, that our politicians on both sides of the aisles don't seem to be very honest with us about what is truly going on in the world right now.
Well, I will say, let me answer that with this. No matter what the nefarious people in the world who've been planning this thing for, if you go some of where you're talking, thousands of years, God is bigger.
Yes.
And God is in control. And let me tell you something. This is a prophetic word that was given to me and revealed to me in a couple different sources from God, but also I've heard other people say something similar. And that is, we are in a time, a season of revival and harvest. And there's something that God is about to do that's going to shock the world. And the world will say there is a God in Israel and a God in the United States of America. When God does whatever it is he's going to do, all is going to seem lost when this happens. Except God has a plan. And it is not about Donald Trump. It's not about the United States of America. It's about a harvest of souls, the end time promised harvest of souls before the revelation really kicks off. And I have people in the Christian church that tell me, oh no, Jesus is coming back tomorrow, and this is it. And I say to them, look, that's great. If God's coming back tomorrow and we all get called up to glory in a rapture, I'm ready to go. I didn't even pack my bags. I don't need them. But however, if Jesus was standing here between me and you, and I'm talking about another billions of souls coming to Christ and getting to go with us on that trip, and you're like, screw them, I'm ready to go, I think Jesus would be on my side. So I'm just saying.
And to throw in here, back to Revelation, the more I read through it, the more I realize scripturally that pre-trib rapture thing is not supported. I don't see that in Revelation. I see us actually being here still when the Antichrist is revealed, and the beast system comes in. We're still going to be here. That's what I see in Revelation.
I believe God gave us dominion over the earth, so why would he take us away from the earth that he gave us? So I'm not a tribulation person either.
Well, the tribulation is going to happen. There is some examples of rapture. Actually, there's 2 or 3 of them in Revelation. But what do they mean, and when do they come? There's different stories. And the word rapture is not used. There's other words used there. But the cycle of Antichrist will one day be cycle of the Antichrist.
Right.
But we're not there yet, I don't believe.
There's a lot of Antichrist.
It happened. Hitler was an Antichrist. It was a cycle of Antichrist that we went through. Okay. And this cycle happens. And with this World Economic Forum, like you said, they're trying to make the one world government and all this stuff. They've done this over and over again. They, meaning the entities behind this, have done this over and over again.
The Illuminati, whatever you want to call them.
There was a prophecy given recently, I think by Robin Bullock, and he said, God says, there is no political solution to what's going on because it's a spiritual solution. And the spirits behind this are eternally old, and they know how to manipulate man.
Of course.
And you can't have a political solution because you're not dealing with the physical, you're dealing with the spiritual. So, and we're right now in one of those cycles. Only God's about to move, and the cycle will break. So, and part of Donald Trump's a part of that. Me and you are part of that. Everybody's. This is a spiritual battle, and you have to understand that it will manifest itself into physical, but the battle's already been won in the spiritual. So it's, and I can't get too much deeper into that without a big old long 3-hour show explanation, but probably not going to do that. So anyways.
How about you, Simone?
I agree with what he said. I believe that it's coming in stages, and that basically just what he did say, and that God has already prepared our future, and we're just waiting to see what he has set out in front of us. And a lot of people are expecting this person or that person, but I personally feel that things are going to come out of nowhere that none of us thought about or imagined, that are going to turn our country around and show us that God has a plan for us, and that it's not going to be any of these people that we're talking about. Like, again, I said, the people who are put in front of us are very low on the poll, and we always concentrate on the bad people and what they're doing. But I believe throughout history and throughout time, God's people have always worked for the betterment of the people, and that our movies and media always only show us the dark side. They never show us the good side, that God does have us cradled in his arms, and that he is going to bring about what he's promised us. It is us, the people, who've turned against God. It's not God who's turned against us.
Well, it's always that way.
Yeah. So this is what we have to understand. We're not waiting for God to punish us. We're punishing ourselves. When we finally open our eyes and we see the light and we live the life with the morals and values and structures that we were supposed to live our lives in, then we will find our redemption and the future that we want. But right now, human beings are our own worst enemy. And that's what we're fighting right now. And like you said, the dark spirits, the dark energies, we fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against rulers of the darkness of this world. And until people understand that, we're going to be continuing to fight them, because we have to take them head on.
So if I could give anybody a word of encouragement who is, if you're currently a follower of Christ Jesus, if you're currently a child of God, if you are encountered amongst the saints, as the word calls us, don't be discouraged. The word promises us that we can be given if we ask for it. We have not because we ask not. You got to get with the Lord. You got to start talking to him if you're not already, and reading his word. I suggest the New Testament, because that's where our salvation is. A chapter a day doesn't take you long. You need to please start praying for his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, just like Jesus instructed us to, because that is coming. I've read the book. I know who wins in the end. Now, are you going to be on that side? That's the choice you have to make now. Are you going to compromise? Are you going to accept the false teachings that you're hearing in big churches and so on, who are leading you astray? God wants you to be rich, that kind of stuff. If you read the word for yourself, you cannot be fooled. Please do that. Please start with the book of John. John is great. It's the last of the 4 gospels. And then keep going. Keep going, please, and pray and ask for guidance. He promises us a peace beyond all understanding. Ask for that. How am I not freaking out and scared like that friend of mine up in Canada I referenced earlier at the end of the show? He literally said, Charlie, I'm scared. I'm really scared. And I basically talked the same way to him. Brother, it's time to get right with the Lord. It's time to get right with the Lord. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. Now you get to choose which side you want to be on. And it's going to be rough. And we're going to be persecuted, and we're going to be attacked. It's been happening for a while now. Look at Hollywood and what happened with the last award show they had. How many times did they mock God through the whole thing?
Yeah, and then 2 days later they had fires.
Yeah, and then 2 days later the fire started.
Just saying.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I know a lot of people who live in Pacific Palisades, and they're just regular people. A lot of people, like native Southern California, their family bought those houses in the 40s and 50s when they were new. Palisades does have some really wealthy big houses, but a lot of people have like 3 and 4 acre, like little farm properties, like you'd see outside Sacramento or any other city in California. Those people's homes have been paid off because their parents paid them off, and that's the only reason they can still live. None of those people can afford to rebuild, and they probably don't have the money to just go live somewhere else while they're
They're not going to
rebuilding.
get approval. They're not going to get permits
Well,
to
a lot of
rebuild
them lost
anyway.
their insurance over the last few months and they couldn't afford to get new insurance. So they've got nothing. And basically, a
And
lot of
there,
people don't understand the way insurance works through credit default swaps. Okay. The insurance company sells part of their insurance to somebody else to take the risk out. Who do you think the somebody else is going to be in all these fires? It's going to be the California and federal taxpayers that are going to be passed off on all this
Biden already
upkeep.
promised that they were going to assume all the debt from the rebuilds. And you brought up
That's
something
not what
too.
he said.
I'll throw
That's
this
not
out.
what he
Okay,
said.
you can tell me what he said in just a second, but I'll throw this
Mhm.
out. Something you brought up is very pertinent, Simone, and that is the fact that because of Prop 13, they weren't paying that much in property taxes as compared to how much value the property had. So the state of California, which is broke and has been broke for a while, wants to reclaim that. And if the federal government is going to absorb all the cost of rebuilding, what are the consequences?
Well, it's
They're
going to get passed on to us. The reason they're taking it because the credit default swap was probably insured by the federal government. You have to dig deep when you're trying to figure out who really controls and what a credit default swap is. It's a way of the insurance company giving the liability to somebody else. So they've already sold it. So the state probably already took part of that. So it's a crazy loop, and
what
we're in California, the plan that they have to do all over the whole country. So they're trying everything out here, and it'll be spread across the rest of the
didn't
nation.
Biden say that the California is a model for the rest of the nation? So what did
No,
Biden
he
say
said
then?
Biden. You're
Mike?
talking about the money when you were talking about he said promised to pay to cover everybody. No, he didn't. He promised to help pay and support governmental operations in the recovery. In other words, he wanted to give a bunch of money to Gavin Newsom.
Right.
A promise of $770, $20 more than the people in North Carolina got to the fire
Or
victims.
Hawaii, Maui?
Well, the
Yeah.
California budget, in my opinion, has been that I was actually did several speaking engagements in the fall regarding the coming bankruptcy of most of the cities and counties in California. And basically, they are all broke and they don't, state can't go bankrupt, but the cities and counties can.
Yeah, that's a
And my
law they passed for
personal
themselves.
opinion is a
They're
lot
not
of
allowed to declare bankruptcy. The state isn't. That's a nice little trick.
Well, all my
Well,
personal opinion is that a lot of it we've been living on disaster money. Like for instance, we got a bunch of money finally from the government or the insurance companies up in Shasta County. And the Board of Supervisors was building 8 homes for the insanely mentally ill so they could have a nice little business and none of the money was going to the fires. So if you understand, they stole all the money from the homeless here in California. They've been stealing from the teachers' pension to pay their current pensions. So the state of California is bankrupt. That's why they want to give the money to Gavin Newsom so he doesn't have to admit our state is
absolutely.
bankrupt.
That's it's a shell game. But
It's a
you
shell
mentioned
game.
something about the credit default swaps, and here's one for you. You've probably already seen the movie, but Charlie, you need to go watch The Big Short.
Yes.
Go watch The Big Short. That explains what she's talking about. That's what caused the financial collapse last time around. Another name for those are derivatives. And what they do is they take these bad debts and they bundle them up into a like a bond, and then they sell them as an investment. And they were doing this with all this bad debt, and that's what they're doing. The insurance company, everybody does it. That's how they cover each. You see, I mentioned earlier in the show that the stock market makes the money on the up and they make the money on the down. And that's how they do it with these credit default swaps. And at the time, it was like, I think it was $100 trillion in what they call derivatives in 2007, 2008 timeframe. That number now, when they redid, remember they had the finance reform, the Dodd-Frank bill. They went in and they were making it so it never happen again, right? Well, in that bill, it says that it changed the relationship of the bank. When you make it before then, when you made a deposit in the bank had a fiduciary liability to make sure they took care of your money. Now, when you deposit that, thanks to Dodd-Frank, when you deposit that money, it is no longer yours, it is the bank's. They have no fiduciary responsibility to you whatsoever.
And they can do a bail-in. So
And they can
remember
do a bail-in.
when they were doing this Dodd-Frank thing, I'm like, oh, these guys, this is bad. I wasn't sure what it was, but I knew that it was something that wasn't going to help us because they created the problem in the first place. Now they're going to fix it. So with the Dodd thing,
you're talking about 2008, that whole collapse.
Yes. So it used to be where the government, so they made it illegal for the government to bail out the banks. So now they're doing what we've seen, and when they've had those recent banking things, they're doing what they call buy-ins. And now a buy-in means the bank can just take your money and give you worthless stock because they're going to sell the bank for pennies on the dollar to one of the major banks, which is the plan anyway. And you're going to end up with nothing, and you'll have nothing.
And you'll be happy.
We're insuring $35 trillion in debt with $150 billion in FDIC funds, and that's the last time I checked. So I bet there's $100 billion now.
Well, let me get back to the. Let me get back
my
to
friends who have left California, including my friend who's on with us right now, Mike Cook, who left California to escape the oppression and repression and tyrannical government and everything. When this state collapses, I don't think there's a place
I pray
to
every single day that the state of California lasts a little bit longer, because my dad and mom grew up out there. My dad retired on PERS, and that's what my mom lives on. So it needs to last long enough. My mom's in her 70s. So it needs to last long enough. My mama doesn't need the money no more.
Well, PERS is one of the pensions they're rating right now to pay.
I understand. My sister tells me, I don't want to hear it because she's also retiring on PERS. But anyways, back to the derivatives. They have this. They call this. I had the word, and I'm totally missing what it is now. But the number. So it was in the neighborhood of. It is derivatives. That's what I'm talking about. In the trillions of dollars in 2008, the number now is greater than $4 quadrillion.
Oh my gosh! It's completely insane.
A quadrillion is 1,000 trillion, so it's $4,000 trillion in these derivatives that are out there that are hanging around, just like the Big Short. That are a bunch of fake money out there that's going to collapse, and that's where I watched this documentary done by this real smart guy, that one of the guys from The Big Short, not the actors but the actual guys, and he talked about this. And what came to mind, there's a Kim Clement prophecy that's a timeline prophecy, is what I call it, and it goes through talking about impeaching Donald Trump twice. It talks about what I believe is the Rona, Donald Trump losing the election, Donald Trump coming back. It talks about a new Snowden horizon, which hasn't happened yet. But right in between, there's like a sideline that's thrown out there where he says, they will say we have no protection. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then I'm watching this documentary on these derivatives, and it says it's how they protect themselves. It's how they cover themselves. The stock market goes up, the stock market goes down. The derivatives cover when they lose in the stock market. When they make a gain in the stock market, they move it over to the derivatives to protect it. And that's how they do it. And they say we'll have no protection. The market, when this finally unwinds, it's the derivative market that's going to collapse. It's their back end, how they're making all this money, how they're protecting themselves. That it's a bunch of nothing. It's a bunch of nothing. It doesn't exist.
Well, a derivative is just something that's created from something else.
Right.
It's your
credit default swaps is a derivative.
Well, even the bond the stock market is a derivative of the bond market, right? Our whole system is based on derivatives. So this is just the fake, like you're saying, Mike, it's the totally fake system that we're in. There's no way we could ever possibly pay any of that back. And the stock market will continue to go up because they're buying their own debt, and then they're selling it, like Mike says, at the back of it, and they're spreading the debt around. So we have not even begun to see what's really going to happen over the next few years. And I don't want to be negative. I just want people to understand what's really coming down and why it's happening. And we've been hyperinflated since, like Mike was saying, since the 70s when we went off the gold standard. And basically both of us are about the same age, all three of us. basically our entire life
Yep.
is based on this system. So everything we've earned, our Social Security, like a lot of people always keep, the Democrats blame the Republicans for cutting Social Security, and the Republicans blame the Democrats. It's because they know when the system collapses, we're only going to get 75% of our benefits immediately. That
If
was
that
signed into
much.
law years ago. So
Actually,
they don't know when it's going to happen. So they
I
keep,
used to believe that when this crashes, that I used to tell people, you better find something else because your check's going to bounce. I used to say that. I don't believe that anymore. I think I'm wrong when I say that. What's going to happen is they're going to continue to give your $782 in Social Security or whatever, or your disability or whatever you're getting. It's just that when you go in the Walmart, it's going
it
to
won't be.
cost $36 for a carton of milk and $150 for a carton of eggs. So it won't be worth anything. You won't have any spending power. And you say to me, how's that even possible? How is that even possible? People can't even comprehend that.
Well, I will tell you
I'm holding $7 billion in my hand, or $6 billion in my hand right here. This is 6 billion Zimbabwe dollars. And with this, I might be able to buy a stick of chewing gum. Maybe. When the Zimbabwe dollar collapsed, it's been about 15 years ago, when it collapsed, they said, we're going to switch over to the American dollar. And every 4 quadrillion or 5 quadrillion Zimbabwe dollars you have in the bank, we're going to give you 5 American dollars.
Well, I was living in communist Russia when the system collapsed, so I've seen this. I was also living in traveling in Venezuela when their system collapsed and the communists took over there.
Well, can you leave the country, please? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. People are like, wherever you go, you seem to collapse the countries. But unfortunately, I guess for some reason, God put me there at that time so I could understand. But I literally watched, my employees didn't have any food to eat. Their fathers, like you said, all got their pension checks. The top neurosurgeon in the country's wife used to clean my apartment because he hadn't been paid in 4 years. So not only were surgeries being done without anesthesia, et cetera, because they couldn't get any medications or anything like that, they just weren't even being done anymore. If you had a brain hemorrhage, you just died because there was nothing left. And people don't think this is going to happen. I was in Venezuela. All the people I know in Venezuela now live in Miami because everything they earned their whole life is now gone, and they live with their children in Miami. So this can happen. It has happened in our lifetimes. We've just been shielded from the reality of it.
Yep. Yeah, I got a friend. There's a large Ukrainian Russian population here in central Missouri. Why they chose here, I don't know. Maybe it's like home. But there's a bunch of them. And I got a Russian friend who told me a story that his uncle came in, because he was in the early 90s when it collapsed. His uncle came to his house and said, you got to take your money, because they didn't keep money in banks there. They kept it under their mattress. They didn't trust banks. And he said, take your money, you got to buy stuff with it. Got to buy anything. Just get it out of cash, because the economy is going to go, what you said, is going to crash. And his uncle went out and bought a bunch of cars, parked them around his house. And said his dad didn't, and the economy crashed. And he said, I can remember standing there. My dad had stacks of cash, rubber band together, wasn't worth anything. Because when the economy crashed in, it wasn't like, okay, so we're just going to print a bigger denomination. They just said, okay, that money's no good. Here's some new money. That's what they did. It was, whoever the whole money you used to have it doesn't work anymore. It's paper. It doesn't exist. You're screwed. That's what they did over there. But my friend's uncle had all those cars. So he was able to sell all the cars to get the new money. You see, he may have paid $5,000 a piece for a used Russian-built car, 5,000 rubles, right? But when the new ruble came, he only got 500 each. Well, that's not fair. He got ripped off. No, the new ruble was worth, the 500 rubles was worth a car, and the old 5,000 rubles was worth a car. The value was in the car. The rubles just was a means of exchange. So he was able to get all his money back, or get his buying power back, by doing, because like you said, it just was a day. It was boom, you're done. The government just said, okay, you're screwed, and started over.
I know people who are doing the same thing right now. They're just buying stuff. If they've got the money, they're just
I don't
buying
know
stuff
anything. I
because
don't
it's
know anything.
actually something they can trade. They're going to buy a tractor. They're going to buy a bicycle. They're going to, whatever anyone's coming to them. I mean, I have a few crazy friends that are just filling up their barns with stuff.
I don't know what you're talking about. I would never do anything like that.
Well, we don't want to get anyone going over to your farm, so I'm not mentioning any names.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is all we're going to have. The money isn't going to matter. We think our bank money's insured. They've got $1 billion insuring 35 trillion. When there's a bank run, what's going to happen? I was laughing the other day. So I knew a guy was at the Signature Bank. He was a shareholder in Signature Bank. He was a large depositor. So until I talked to him, he was pretty happy with the fact that he got this stock. And after we talked for a while and I explained to him what a buy-in and showed him how he could go look it up and how they'd done it in the past and how the shareholders ended up with nothing, I've never heard from that guy again. But by the end of our conversation, he understood what I was saying and he was not a happy camper. So this is just on a small group of people with wealthy people who have money to lose. Today, most Americans don't even have anything in the bank. So it's really not a threat. The inflation has been a threat to us.
Nothing is perfect as far as trying to save yourself from this. As Larry Burkett said in 1992, the coming economic earthquake. Mm-hmm. He was early on his prediction because they kept kicking that can down the curb. Because like in the fires there in Pacific Palisades, there was a guy who had 100 Bitcoin inside of a wallet that they put him on this cold storage wallet inside of his safe, and it burnt up in the fire. It melted down. It was inside the safe, but it got hot enough it melted it down. You can't access it anymore. So that Bitcoin's gone.
Okay, well, this is my question with Bitcoin, and I guess that there must be some coins floating around anywhere. But my thing with Bitcoin is when the computers go down, what do we have? Do we have something?
Nothing.
Okay, so we've got.
Well,
nothing.
In Bitcoin, you still have it. The question is, can you access it?
And can you do anything with it?
Well, and that's again, can you access it? Can you do anything with it? Is it any value? What is it? Well,
it's also tethered to our current bond and stock market.
I'm not a proponent of Bitcoin, but I'm not a hater of Bitcoin either.
It's another thing too, though. It's not a tangible product. It's not something like gold and silver that you can actually hold.
100% fiat.
Do you notice? Do you guys understand symbology and how they're always telling us what they're doing? You just have to read the signs and the symbols.
Well, I understand it. I'm not a big
I can
terror of it, but
yeah, I can read what they say, and if I can tell when they're messaging, so I can go look it up because they do talk to each other back and forth. But what does the Bitcoin have on the front of it? It's got the Roman emperor guy. And then it's got not a lot of people think that's an olive leaf, but it's really seaweed. So the same people who believe they descended from the gods that come out of that Ukrainian Caucasus area that control the current banking system, people call them crypto Jews because they were forcibly converted and they have secretly continued to practice Baal worship. If you notice, if a lot of people who identify as Jewish, especially among the elite, don't believe in God. So that's kind of a confusing.
I know, it's weird.
So the Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency. The current fiat system is run by the crypto Jews. And this isn't an anti-Semitic statement. This group of people has been doing this for a long time. It has nothing to do with our regular neighbors and the people we know in school. None of them know each other. But these certain people that descend from these specific bloodlines in this European dynasty.
Oh, we lost you.
Oh, no. This happened recently.
Mike in the comment section says, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. That's something that's one of the Patriot Mike Show principles is if you don't hold it.
That's what I say too.
Who owns most of Bitcoin right now at this moment? The Federal Reserve. And how did they get it? From confiscation.
I know they confiscated a bunch of it.
Who's the largest Bitcoin holder? The Federal Reserve. And so they confiscated it all. So who's really controlling the Bitcoin market if they own 80%?
One of the things,
just like the way they control the stock market, the same groups.
One of the things that the Bitcoin bros have been really hyping is this these what do they call them? The can't remember what the technical term of it is. No.
Like the meme
These big
coins?
banks, these big investment firms are buying up Bitcoin and creating paper Bitcoin. So you can go to Charles Schwab, wrong one, Charles Schwab, and buy. I'm going to Freudian slip there, and buy a Bitcoin paper investment. And you're not buying the Bitcoin, you're buying the investment in the Bitcoin.
Does it actually say turn this in for tangible product? Does
Pretty
it
much, yes.
like our dollar?
And so what that is,
To me, it's all
they're all piping this up because look, they're buying it up. The price is going up. Woo, we're going to get rich when they all do this. We're going to get stinking filthy rich. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. And I'm like, no, you don't understand what's going on. As a gold and silver buyer, I understand what's going on because they created all this paper gold and paper silver so they can dump the paper and drive the price down and buy the real and then drive the price up and then dump the paper. And this is repeated cycle of manipulation of the market. They're trying to gather control. Bitcoin's been out of their control. It's uncontrollable supposedly. But if they create all this paper Bitcoin, they can manipulate the market. They can dump the paper, drive the price of Bitcoin down, buy it on the low, and siphon it all up. Let the price go back up naturally. Start trading a bunch of paper on it, drive the price up. And then dump the paper and do the same thing over and over again, which is exactly what they do with gold. It's exactly what they do with silver.
Manipulate the silver market.
They manipulate the price. And that's
You're
exactly
so
what
right,
they're doing
Mike.
with Bitcoin right now. They're driving that price up. And they're going to dump that paper on the market. They're going to sell billions and billions of dollars worth of paper, not their actual physical Bitcoin that they're holding on to. They'll dump that paper. The price will drop. People will go, oh my God, I got to sell. And they'll go, just like at the end of Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, buy. While everybody else is panicking.
Frozen orange juice.
It's right. They're buying when everybody else is panicking. They're selling when everybody else is buying. And that's how they manipulate the market. That's the way they do everything. And this paper trading stuff it's gonna burn you in the end because you can't trade it fast enough. They do this with AI computers in a blink of an eye. You can't trade it fast enough.
So do you think Trump's trolling the Bitcoin people, or do you think he really thinks this is our next this is one of my main problems. If he's really deregulating the banks, we're in the middle of a banking crisis. We need less regulation on the banks. I don't think so. We're going to use Bitcoin as our currency. I mean, I just hope he's trolling him because it's not a constitutional.
I don't think we're going to use Bitcoin as a currency, but I
concerned.
think he sees a value in Bitcoin. I'm not really sure how that's going to work yet. I like he's a lot smarter guy than I am. And I'm not really sure what he's doing, but I think the moves that he's making is going to turn Bitcoin from $100,000 coin to $1 billion coin by the time he's done. Based on the same thing the dollar's based on.
Yeah, it's only worth whatever they say it's worth.
Nothing. So we're just getting
but that's not going to be. I hope that's not going to be the system that is the money. That is another. It's another. It's just like stocks and bonds. They're all worth opinion too. So.
Yes, good point. Really bring back the gold standard.
I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know.
I think he's going to bring in the land standard. That's what we originally went to war against.
That would be something that he understands is the land standard.
They wanted to base our currency and value on land. And that, like a lot of people think we declared war on England, they declared war on us because they saw it as treason against the crown that we wanted to issue our own money because, again, we were in the Roman Admiralty law system under the British, and they had to keep us in the same fiat currency system. This plan was going on for a long, long time. They've used this Roman birth certificate system. That's how the Romans kept power for so long, because they kept basically in slavery through debt. So again, the reason for banks is not to make money. The reason for banks is to create debt, therefore power.
And that's
over the people.
The banks were different 100 years ago. your savings and loan. You take a look at the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
A Wonderful Life.
The bank was a different philosophy. Now you had Mr. Potter and his bank, but like the savings and loans, of course, all the savings loans went bankrupt in the 80s, and that was intentional. So there was a different philosophy. There was a different relationship between the customer and the bank. And nowadays it is totally a manipulation. It's totally a big suck as much money out of you as they can, and they're not in your favor. It's like going to the casinos. They're not in your favor. The stock market is not in your favor.
No.
If they talk about real inflation has been not 2% or 3% or even 6%, which has been the average over the last 40 or 50 years. Inflation has been 20 or 30 or 40%. So if you're getting, I'm doing real great in my Roth IRA, I'm getting 11% interest compounded yearly. But you're not keeping up with the real true inflation, which, by the way, when the government counts inflation, they don't count anything that inflates. They take food, gas,
or
housing.
gas.
They take all that out of it.
Which is why Biden was able to say over and over and over again, oh no, our economy's thriving.
And who did that? George Bush Sr. Because our country
it wasn't
was
just George Bush
then.
Sr. There's been 2 or 3 iterations of changing the accounting on inflation since 1971.
It was Bush.
Well,
then
it was also
Clinton.
Jimmy Carter, and it was Ronald Reagan. Actually, it wasn't them.
Yeah.
It was the bureaucratic the Treasury and the Fed and all that did that. And they just stopped counting the things that you used to count and count other things. That's basically all that is.
If you look at our history,
I don't know what they count. I've tried it. What if you're not counting gas, housing, or food? What are you putting in the
refrigerators.
inflation number? Refrigerator. Oh yeah, because
I just think they make a number up and just throw it out there, so it doesn't matter. You know how they come up with the jobs number, right? The jobs number, like they're going to do a jobs number at the end of the month for January on new hires. We created 175,000 new jobs. How do they come up with that number? Do you know?
No.
They have that number, by the way, because you have to file your W-2s and your W-4s, right? So they know how many people are working. That number is there at the IRS. They know. That's how come they revise it down 4 or 5 months later. They go look at the real numbers. Here's the way they come up with it.
Well,
at the end of the month, they're going to say X amount of number new jobs created. Here's how they do it: number of people born, number of people died. That's how they come. That's
nothing
the
to do. Well, if you know, the month before the election, they announced 250,000 new jobs, and they turned around and they put it down to 12,000, which is basically Christmas hiring.
The 12,000 that you got to understand, because of the number of people born, the number of people died, the number of people that turned 18 this year or 16 this year and entered the job market and filled out a W-4 form, just through attrition. That's 100,000, 200,000 people every month. Okay. Just through attrition, number of people retiring, just because of the size of the country. So if you're telling me 12,000, and I saw that same number, you got to understand how bad that is. That is historically bad. That is like worse than the Great Depression bad. See, Rush Limbaugh said before he passed away that we're already in a Great Depression. The only difference is that in the Great Depression, if you wanted to get soup, you had to go stand in the mafia soup line in Chicago. That's where you went. There was no welfare. There was no Social Security. There was none of this money being handed out by the government. Nowadays, we're in a Great Depression, only you don't feel it, so you're not depressed. Because everybody's covered.
I agree with you 100%.
Everybody's getting a check, getting a benny somewhere, so no one feels the pain. So that's the economic. This was Rush Limbaugh. So he passed away, 5 years ago now? 4 years ago? So this was before he passed away. So this has been going on for this long, and he listed all the economic measurements that were far worse than they were in the Great Depression, but we're hiding it with government spending. And if you can just print money,
Well, and we're also hiring it. We're hiding it with all of the military spending. My personal belief and understanding is that the country went bankrupt in 1999. Since then, we've been involved in all these foreign conflicts. Otherwise, the banks would be non-liquid before that, because 90% of the foreign aid that we issue stays in the United States in our banks to buy supplies, to buy military weapons. Even Lenensky was saying, we need more money. You've only given us 10%.
well,
So when you listen to what they're saying, that money stayed in our bank. So this is something else we're facing if we're
Isn't
pulling
that
out of all
laundering?
these wars and we're not going to be
Isn't that
issuing
money
all this
if you
laundering?
do
money.
it, it's
Our
laundering.
banks are going to become
You know,
Well, if I do
you're
it, it's
saying
laundering.
you're saying that you know, because there's no money at the banks because of
Not
fractional
anymore.
reserve banking.
Right.
Fractional reserve banking says
Yes.
that if I'm the bank, and Charlie comes to me and gets on his hands and knees, takes his hats on, please, master, can I have some more? And I give him $1,000 credit card, and Charlie's like, woohoo! I'm going to Cancun. And he takes off and goes to Cancun, max out that credit card, right?
That sounds about right.
Charlie has $1,000, and the bank is what? How much money does the bank have? If I'm the bank, so the Bank of Mike gives Charlie $1,000 credit card, how much money does the Bank of Mike have of that transaction?
None.
10,000. I have $10,000 because once I make the loan to Charlie for $1,000, I can fractionally reserve. I can loan 10 times. That's now considered a asset, not a liability, and I can loan 10 times on that asset. You having to pay me back that $1,000 is considered an asset. Even though I don't actually have the money, I can loan on it 10 times. So now I do that 10 more times. That's $100,000. How much money do I have now? $1 million.
Right, and that's why we don't have any liquidity in the banks.
I have $1 million
here, because if they weren't pumping the money, there'd be no liquidity.
Right.
Like
well,
you say,
I have
no
$1 million, right? Because I loaned you 1,000, and I took that money and I loaned it out 10 more times. I can times that times 10. That's $1 million. Now you come to me and buy a home, right? And you buy a Southern California's a $500,000 home, which is the medium home. So you get a 1,900 square foot, 75-year-old ranch style home in Southern California for $500,000. Now out here in Missouri, you get that for about 180. But I digress. But you buy that home, and I write you a check. Actually, I don't write you a check. I write a check to the bank, right? I write a check to the bank that has the lien on the home, or to the right. So there's no money that you get in your hand, right? The check that I write for 500,000 is that $1 million I got because I loaned you 1,000. There's no money changing hands. There's no money there. There's agreement between your bank and my bank that check is good. That's it. That's all there is agreement. And they change numbers on a computer. That's it. And that's how fractional reserve banking works. The banks are broke. There's no money there. It's a big shell game. So
people laugh at me because I keep my money. When I get paid, I take my money out. I'll pay my immediate bills that day, and then I stock it, and in small increments. And I know you should be buying other things, but originally there's, even today, it's easier to buy stuff like eggs from the farmer down the street, and then I get my tomatoes from the other person. And so we need to start kind of be building, like you said, the way the banks are working. We're going to have to rely on each other.
I gratefully live in Amish and Mennonite country, so there's lots of eggs and cows and chickens and all kinds of little markets I can buy from. Yeah, I can go.
You can actually buy raw milk.
Less than a mile from here is a meat market, Amish meat market, where they sell raw milk and cheeses and all kinds of stuff they make themselves. Wow. They butcher their own stuff. I can go over there right now, get a quarter beef. I can go over there right now and buy a hamburger or a roast. It's cheaper than Walmart, and I know it's grown right here. And the other thing is the Amish, they don't use all of the scientific methods. Yeah, that's all
hormones.
They don't use none of that. They don't believe in it. So
why don't they believe in it, Mike? This is going back to what I was saying earlier.
Because they don't believe in modern science. They believe in that would be too worldly for them. So it's a religious belief in them. So I'm not going to say that because I not believe
I
that they have
will.
the right God. I don't believe they have the right God. They have
But
flaws in their
they
system.
are
But
doing it for that reason, though. They're
I understand
doing it
it's
because
because
they're
they don't
answering to a higher power.
they don't want to be worldly. They want to separate themselves from the world, and so they don't do they've been farming the same way they've been farming for 200 years.
Right.
And they're going to survive
Well,
when
why
all
do you
the
think
rest
I
of
like
us are
living
running
around
around
here?
with our
Because
heads cut off
they're
and
going to still have to sell their
fails.
stuff. That's why I have silver, so they'll take it. By the way.
This is gee whiz.
I mean, this is the reality of what's going on right now, and a lot of people don't want to face it, and they think somebody's new and coming to change, and that's kind of my fear, that everybody's going to go back to sitting there watching the Kardashians and football games and everything. And really, this is really a call to action. This
Well, let
discussion
me
that we're
give you some
having,
hope.
and for people to
Okay.
become more
Because
aware.
this will be the most severe crash in American history, but it will be short-lived. That is a prophetic thing and an understanding of the man who's in the White House now. He's going to be like Coolidge on steroids, because not only is he not going to do anything, he understands business, he understands money, he's going to do the right things to correct the situation, which is cut the regulations, cut the red tapes, get rid of the ABCs getting in the way, move government, not let government do anything, but move government out of the way, cut taxes, elimination of taxes. Those kind of things that he does, it will kindle the fire of this economy, and the American people will do what the American people do, and boom, that economy is going to drop. And here's the thing, in the dropping, those people who are invested most in the system will get the most damage. Those people, like a friend of mine, grew up in the hill country of Missouri, a poor farmer family. He says to me, you know, that Mike, there's a difference between old poor and new poor. Old poor knows how to run a trout line. Old poor knows how to shoot a deer and butcher it. Old poor knows how to get by with what they have and not have to go to the Walmart or to the more expensive places and buy things. Old poor doesn't know anything about Uber, doesn't know anything about Uber Eats and all that. Old poor knows how to live poor. New poor, they don't understand how to live poor. Their lifestyle is going to go from living in the big city, having everything at their fingertips all at once with a lifestyle of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month, to what the old poor guy calls normal. So living in this part of the country, we have the resources and the availability that maybe saying living in LA or San Francisco or New York you don't have. I always say I love South Florida. I love the Fort Lauderdale area. I love to go on vacation there. It's fantastic, but I don't want to be there when the world ends. There's sharks on one side and alligators on the other and 7 million people. That's not where I want to be. So I want to be out here in the Midwest where, you know, the Amish folks are just down the road, and if I need to, they'll barter with me. I'll probably get screwed by them because they're pretty shrewd. But
Did we put up that invitation?
We did earlier.
That I sent
yeah,
you
you
at the
said
beginning? I
it
can't
was
remember.
referenced
Oh, we
as the
did.
city of Washington, not
what we're
Washington,
saying-
D.C.
So to me, that's a sign that this has already begun, because it means we've separated from the Federal Reserve System. So to me, that's a sign that things
Can I
have
ask you
headed
a
in the right
question about that, though?
direction. Because
Both of you, I want your input on this.
Sure.
We look throughout our history of the United States of America, any president or those in power able to do so who have talked about ending the Federal Reserve System get murdered.
Actually, the Federal Reserve System has ended twice in our history. Central bank was developed and then ended by presidents twice. You know, Jefferson, I think, was one, and maybe Adams was the other. I can't remember. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. But it is twice before the Fed system we have now. They created central reserve banks, and they were ended by presidents. So yes, it can happen. As a matter of fact, all it takes is an act of Congress, because all who created it was an act of Congress. It's that simple.
It all goes down to the money. And Congress holds the
But
purse
hence
strings.
we have people like Jeffrey
Go ahead,
Epstein.
Simone.
Hence we have
Go ahead, Simone.
we have people like Jeffrey Epstein and P. Diddy, who are servants of these systems, and Ghislaine Maxwell, who work for the Federal Reserve System to keep all these people in line through blackmail extortion, right? So we've been seeing the breakdown of this system in front of us when these people are being arrested and being taken out, because they're actually the enforcers of this system. So I have hope that things are getting better, and I'm hoping that the new system isn't just the same group repackaged,
Well, if
giving
we
us
have some
something
sort
else
of
that's-
version of a Federal Reserve System, then that's exactly what we're going to have. But if they get rid of the Federal Reserve System and they go to a system like we had in the mid 1800s, you know, Donald Trump has talked about this,
You're
that
right.
the great growth of wealth this world has ever seen was the United States of America between 1820 and 1890, when there was no tax code, when there was no regulations, there was no EPAs, there was no NEAs, there was no FBI, there was none of that. None of that existed. It was, you go out there and
well, and that's the reason they had to come to the United States and infiltrate us and take us over, because just like today, people were leaving all the systems of the old Roman system, of the old European systems, wherever the countries that people were coming to, they were all fleeing to the United States to get away. All the youth, all the young people, all the money, all the investment, all of the ingenuity was leaving them and coming here. And we're seeing exactly the same way, because the same forces that are trying to collapse our country have already collapsed all these other countries. And now people are desperate because they've been living under these awful totalitarian systems. And now they're fleeing to the United States again. And that's why the United States needed to be brought down, so nobody has anybody to run away from their totalitarian systems too.
oh yeah,
No,
absolutely.
it does. But
sense?
now we factor in what Biden did for 4 years, and Obama started it, just absolutely inundating us with illegals. Those are not people who.
Well, when this is maybe an unpopular statement, but the fact is the entire Western world, including China, are going to have a really difficult time recapturing their former thing, because their former glory, unless we do some dramatic changes, because we have population issues in every country. The reason they just let they say around 17 million people, predominantly working class, laboring, a lot of people that aren't skilled in that, coming to the United States. Well, what did they do for the first few hundred years we were in power? We brought Black poor people, and from other Western countries. The Black people were not the only slaves. Irish people were slaves. Poor Italian people were slaves. We brought all that youth to America and brought it here and really propelled our system into what it is today. I mean, slavery was definitely a proponent of that. So we have to understand that this has been happening for a long time, and the United States was a window where people everywhere in the world went with the clothes on their back for a brighter future and a brighter life, to get away from the system that they've just re-implemented in Europe via the EU, which they've implemented in China via communism, which they've collapsed all the South American governments and implemented their crazy New World Order stuff. And so everyone is fleeing to here. But what also did we do during this eugenics process? We let in exactly the amount of Black people that they aborted over the last 50 years. It's about 17 million people. So they're just replacing the working class, and they're replacing the dynamic. And we're stealing from all the other countries' youth because we have a problem. In Europe, there are signs. Like, I used to live in France, and there used to be signs everywhere for the women that said, "There's more to life than sex. Have a baby. We'll pay you to have a baby." So this has been something that's culminating for a long time. And if the United States does send 17 million people out of this country, it's going to affect the demographic, because we also have a problem that we can't, like in Russia, they're closing factories because there's nobody to work in them. And this is a situation that every Western nation is facing. And this is something that although we've talked about a lot of these other things, the fact that our demographic has dramatically changed so much is going to be a detriment to financial recovery. And the only really way that it could be better, is, I've thought a lot about it, is if they remove taxation. So we get to keep the 50% they're taking away from us now.
That's what I mean by the
which
1800s. There was none of that. All these mega billionaire families made all their wealth in the 1800s, and now they're 3-4 generations down. These names, the Rothschilds and the Carnegies and the DuPonts and all them, when there was no taxes, so they got to keep everything that they made. And the other, what fixes all this right here that we were just talking about? What fixes all of this is revival in the church and harvest of souls who come to Christ and follow what the Bible says. Because what's the first commandment given? Reproduce and multiply.
And fill the earth.
Oh, yeah.
Reproduce and multiply and fill the earth.
I
Guess
missed
what?
that one.
If people become Christians and Christians start having babies, that fixes your problem that you were just talking about. It fixes it all. You have growing. If you want to keep Social Security, and you have more babies being born in the next generation than in the current generation, any Ponzi scheme keeps working as long as you have more people to pay in. It collapses very quickly when the pool of people to pay in stops happening, which is what you're talking about. And so another thing to add to that, this migration of people, this inviting everybody, millions of people into our country, is Cloward and Piven is what it is. Have you ever heard of Cloward and Piven? Have you guys heard of that? Okay. Look it up. Cloward and Piven were two college professors in the 60s, and they said we can collapse the American society into a safety net of socialism and communism by overwhelming the system, by giving everybody welfare, by giving everybody benefits, and by mass migration into the United States of unskilled labor that would live off the system, causing the system to overspend and collapse into communism.
Well, I think those guys came to the show late. That is the
Here we are today. That's a great
That's the Communist Manifesto, isn't it?
So, well, go look it up. Cloward and Piven. Go Google it. Their research papers are out there. That was their plan. Hillary Clinton put it in her book. Saul Alinsky talked about it in his book. So this is their philosophy. This is their philosophy.
Who is that? Rules for Radicals is their Bible.
Well,
people like the Obamas or Soteros and the Clintons, and they reference it and they talk about it and they're proud of it. They write their papers in college about Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals and Communist Manifesto. That's exactly who they are, and they're.
Do you know that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that that Klaus Schwab was a Rothschild. I mean, Klaus Schwab is a Rothschild, but Karl Marx was a Rothschild, and Klaus Schwab is directly descended from Karl Marx. So Karl Marx there's a really good book out right now called The Devil and Karl Marx. Even like I said, communism is based in the doctrine of bringing about Satan's rule over the planet. All original communism talked about this. They cleaned it out over the years, but all original, like I said, I've lived in several communist countries. All their original doctrine is about bringing Lucifer's rule. And I mean, Karl Marx came from a wealthy family, and he lived off his family. He never worked a day in his life, right? He was smelled. He never bathed.
That sounds like so many Democrats I know.
Body. I mean,
did he have blue hair? No, just kidding.
Yeah, piercings all over.
So these people, what you have to understand, everything we're going through comes kind of out of the 17th century, these think tanks in Germany. They created the concept of capitalism, socialism, Marxism, fascism. They actually created these kinds of things, and they're like, oh, we'll try this over here. We'll try this over here. So all of these feminism, right? Destruction of the family. Right. And control of the government over women and children. You don't need a husband. The government will take care of you. Right. These are all concepts that came over time. So I think a lot of people just don't really understand how this last few hundred years has brought us to the point that we're at today. And that it has been the battle between the good people and the dark people. And through our last wars, I personally believe right now we're seeing the end of the Civil War, which was put in place to bring about the Federal Reserve System. You can study it and see who financed it and what they were doing and infiltrating and how they got control after the Civil War. What did they do? They started going around collecting everybody's silver and gold and giving them paper money. And that's what they wanted since the very beginning. And again, the reason we went to war with England originally was because we were planning on issuing our own currency based on land value. And so to me, that's the only thing. Land never changes, it never moves. So that would be the one way for us to restructure our economy without gold or silver, because everybody's not going to have that either.
Well, they can't take it if I don't give it to them. Again, we have guns because we have
because
guns.
we have guns
out in California, but around here, well, it's true. If you just think about that statement in the depth of it, it's really hard to take a gun away from somebody that's willing to use it.
Well, and that's why they've been
But
trying.
that's
to
why they
take
haven't
our
succeeded,
guns.
because no one wants to go around and collect them. Who wants to be that sucker? You go down that street, collect everybody's guns.
Right,
yeah,
right.
That's not a good day.
That's not a good day.
No, Canadians are so convinced that Americans are so violent. I have a lot of Canadian friends, and they're like, "Oh, well, you just don't understand. I mean, American has so much gun violence and all this stuff." I'm like, well, it's a lot more violent when you have no gun at all, and they just come kill everybody you've ever
with
known.
explosives or knives or whatever they'll always use something to murder and to take the life of somebody that they disagree with, who's standing in the way of them bringing in and ushering in the world that they want, regardless of who they are.
Bunker said, what do you want them to do? Push them out windows?
Well, like in England, right? They made guns illegal. Everybody
That's why they
gets
banned
stabbed
knives, and that's why they
now.
banned.
They're still killing people.
That's why they banned
just
even
have a new weapon.
steak knives in London.
I mean, how insane is that?
Insane.
Good Lord, help us. I'm going to pray out this show. Okay.
Probably
so I want to.
Okay.
I remove my hat because the word talks about do not have your head covered when you are praying. No pastor preaches on that either, but that's why I'm taking off my hat, despite the fact that I've got serious hair loss problems going on. That's why I'm always wearing a hat. I'm like, oh crap, I don't even want to mess with it. Just wear a hat.
Well, just as a quick note, do you know where the yarmulke derived from?
Male pattern baldness.
The freed slaves used to wear a felt hat, and it would signify they were a freed slave.
Oh, I'll be darned. So, well, thank you for that. I did not know that.
And the Jews believe that they don't want their head to be open.
I want to pray, but I want to invite you all to pray too. Okay, so I'll start, and depending on who feels led to do it next, and we'll close out the show with prayer. Okay, you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Father, this has been eye-opening. This has been tremendously powerful. This has been frightening. This has been concerning. And Father, I beg that you will remind all of your people that of your promise to give us a peace beyond all understanding. I beg you to please give them a desire to read your word so that they cannot be fooled and to really seek you. Father, please put that, if that is true, that there is it is. I know that it's true because your word talks about it. A proliferation of people coming to you, worshiping you, returning to you. And Father, we all want to be a part of that. And as a follower of your Son, Yeshua, Christ Jesus, I thank you so much for even giving me the opportunity to do this show and to talk to people like this and to get viewpoints out there that nobody else is really talking about. Father, I value this so much, and I thank you so much for the opportunity. And I pray that people who watch this will not be discouraged, will not be frightened, but be motivated to action, be motivated to do something, but always with you at the very head of our decisions, that you will teach us how to really pray to you, that you will teach us how to really communicate with you, that you will move in our lives, our hearts and our minds with your Holy Spirit. Father, I invite your Holy Spirit now into all of us for understanding, clarification. Your word promises that it's complete and everything we need there for instruction and for correction and for whatever it is. You tell us in your own word 365 times throughout the entire Bible, fear not. Father, please remind us. Please give us that desire to draw nearer to you and closer to you through whatever is coming, Lord, to know, because you promise you're going to take care of your children. Please make us ready for whatever it is that's coming. Prepare our minds, our hearts, our bodies, the temple that you blessed us with, that we'll be ready for whatever it is that's coming. Whatever it is, make us ready, please, Father, in your name, Christ Jesus, I pray. And I thank you so much for Mike and Simone. Such a great blessing to even get to know them and talk with them. Please bless them and help them, and let them be effective. Most importantly, all of us effective for you, for your kingdom and your will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lord Jesus, in your name I pray. Amen and amen.
Lord, as we're sitting here praying and wrapping up this big, long discussion we had about all this scary stuff, Lord, I don't ask for a spirit of fear. I don't want to be a fear monger. I want to be a watchman on the tower, warning of what's coming so that we can be prepared. And as we're sitting here discussing this and we're praying at the end, I feel like Jeremiah, after Israel had fallen and Babylon was gathering up the people to take them back to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans, in captivity, Jeremiah said to the people that remained, don't listen to the people telling you this or that. Build homes, build gardens, have children, be given in marriage and give in marriage, and prepare and plan and be successful in the land that God is taking you to. He said, pray for the land that God is taking you to, for the nations that he's putting you in, for the nation you live in. Because if it prospers, you prosper. And know that everything that's happening right now is about God. It's not about the devil. It's not about Donald Trump. It's not about Joe Biden. It's about God. That's what he's saying right now. It's about him and bringing you to him.
Yes, Father.
So turn to God right now.
Yes,
if you don't know the Lord as your Savior, get to know him.
Yes.
Go read his word. And when you read his word,
Yes.
this is what he's saying. When you read my word, start in the beginning where it says beginning. But before you do that, ask for the Lord's Holy Spirit.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
For discernment, understanding.
The apostle asked the eunuch in the chariot, do you understand what you're reading? And he says, how can I if no one interprets? Ask the Holy Spirit to interpret what you are reading.
Right.
And you will find a relationship with God and a relationship with Christ that will change your life. You will no longer live in a spirit of fear, because what is this time but a moment compared to eternity? Amen. So Lord, please give us your Holy Spirit to guide us and direct us, and give us faith in the hard times that come and in the good times that come. Let them be a glory to God. Sing praises to God and glorify God when it's good and when it's bad.
Right.
That's what I pray for me, Lord. No spirit of fear. No spirit of fear. God doesn't come in fear. Just watch and wait and see what the glory of God does. And I thank you for everything that you do, Lord. In Jesus' name.
Jesus. Amen. Amen and amen.
And thank you, Lord, as we lift up Charlie and Mike's prayers. I just want to ask for guidance, for tolerance, for patience, and for love, for the ability to forgive. Many people have been through difficult times. The political times, the social times have really divided us from our own families, from our own neighbors, from our own children sometimes. God, I just ask that you lift up our souls so we can share with each other and forgive each other for all of the things that we've done, because many of us had turned against God and we haven't listened to what we were supposed to be doing, sometimes even if we know that's what we're supposed to be doing. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a revival like the the original believers, and we're going to be like at the day they went to Bethel and they made their new covenant with God because the tribes have been divided from God. And we met again and we all reconnected with God. So that's what I'm praying for. Let's put aside all our petty differences. Let's not be happy that the rich people
Right.
lost their homes in Santa Monica. There was a lot of poor people. Let's not become the people that we've been accusing the other people of being, God. Please just keep us all on the right road. Keep us modest. Keep us as listeners and guiders and teachers and parents and grandparents and lovers of humanity, because we believe that there is a beautiful, a brighter future ahead. And we pray for all of our politicians and all of our leaders worldwide to lead us to a positive place. But God, we understand that it's our faith in you and our lack of fear that is going to move us forward to the promised land.
Your
Amen.
name, Lord Jesus. Amen. Let me put my yarmulke back on.
Yeah. I got hair, so don't worry about it.
Did you know
I'm
that about the
free.
yarmulke?
I'm free.
I was always curious where the history of the yarmulke
The Apostle
came
Paul
from.
wrote that I have learned to
Yeah.
be content in all things. I've known great wealth. I've known great poverty. I've known sickness. I've known health. And I've learned to be content in all things. That puzzled me for a long time because I've been through. I've got valleys, mountains and valleys in my life. Thank goodness I love roller coasters. And that puzzled me, though, for the longest time. And then I know it's the Holy Spirit that brought clarity to me when I realized he didn't say God has taught me these things. He said he chose. I have learned, he said, to be content in all things.
Yep.
It's a choice, isn't it? And I will leave this with you both so you will hopefully be inspired by it and continue with what you're doing, because I love the work that you both do. And I'm going to ask you to share how we can find you. Ephesians 5:11. Be no part of the works of darkness, but instead even expose them. So please don't stop. Please don't stop. Mike, where do we find you? How do we follow you?
Patriot Mike Cook on Rumble and Patriot Mike Show everywhere else.
Okay. And how about you, Sue?
I'm Simone Anderson, and my show's called Lost in Translation Show. That's one word on Rumble. And I'm also on YouTube at Lost in Translation. And yeah, it's been a great show. Thank you for so much for having me.
I've loved it. I've loved every single second of it. This is the longest show I've done. 3 hours and 20 minutes. This is the longest show I've done. And every single bit of it to me has been fascinating. So I appreciate you both so much. Thank you again.
It's like Rush Limbaugh without commercials.
What am I hearing?
And some feminine
It's
energy.
some feminine
Rush
energy.
with a little feminine energy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. I'll see you all in a bit.
All right, you guys.
you
Well,
later.
it was
I'm
great
sorry.
talking.
I cut her off before she could say goodbye. I'm a
That's
bad
okay.
host. You know me. I'm so way too ADHD to actually be running these controls. That's a mistake made. Bye, Mike. And this right here, that's a little QR code that'll take you right to supporting this show and supporting this ministry if you can. And it's venmo.com/DoNotTalk. That QR code, if you do your little camera thing on, it'll take you right to it. Venmo.com/DoNotTalk. May God bless you and keep you. May God bless America. But most importantly, America bless God.